Ready, everybody? All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. This is a special study session, and it is 5:36, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. I guess we'll start with roll call.
Councilmember Alves? Here. Councilmember Hupty? Here. Councilmember Taylor? Present. Vice Mayor Haskell?
Here.
Mayor Warnikoff?
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you. So I'm going to, one of the things, because a study session is something that we haven't done in this format before. And so my understanding is we are going to start with a presentation from Sharif. We're going to wait for him to go through his entire presentation. After that, we'll take oral comments. We'll be limiting them to 3 minutes per our typical format there. And then there will be questions and conversation with the council. And then we will open it up for oral communications again, correct? More or less.
Yes.
Okay.
Less formal. We can have a question and answer. If you
Yeah, afterwards. Excellent. Awesome. So with that, Sharif.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Thank you all for your attendance today. And thank you for everyone that's in attendance on Zoom and in the schoolhouse. Thank you. As you mentioned, Mayor, we're not quite used to study sessions here. And what I wanted to do was get us used to the cadence of having study sessions in the future, especially as we get through some of these things that we talk about. We might have a study session on housing. We might have a study session on a new project in town. We might have a study session on the budget. But this gives us a more informal way to present and then also have dialogue, not only with council, but also with the community. And study sessions do not have to be on a council night per se. They can be at a different time during the week. It could be before or after a study council meeting, a different day. And so there's some flexibility there with these study sessions as we move forward. Wanted to share with everybody the state of the town and our financial outlook moving forward. I did have the opportunity to run this by our chair of our finance committee, George Savage, and was able to get his input. And thank you, George, for attending with us and actually being on the dais with us today. In the future, as we have study sessions, what I'd ideally like us to do is eventually get us actually off the dais and on tables and chairs, like in a U shape or a square, where we can have dialogue together, which our technology doesn't quite work with the microphones being directional. But in the future, that's something we can do to make this even more of a casual setting, if you will. And so with that, Cindy will share her screen with the presentation. I have my notes here. For some reason, it does not want to talk to each other. This is a high-level presentation. I did not go into major detail on some of these pieces. I wanted to get us all on the same page as a group. So some of this information might be repetitive. Some of this information will be new for folks, but wanted us to have all on the same baseline, if you will. And I will share this slide deck after today with the community. So we'll post that on our website and get that out to everybody so they can have a copy of this as we move forward. Next slide, please. As you recall, I believe I've been here about 8.5 months as your town manager. So as your newish town manager, I had some immediate focuses as I came in. And for lack of a better word, we're in a little bit of chaos mode. And so one of my immediate priorities was to get our house in order. And I mentioned that from the very beginning. Getting our house in order, making sure we have the right staff in the right place, making sure that we're able to implement council goals moving forward. And that immediately was with the finance catch-up. And so as you all know, I immediately hired Christian Company to come in. They provided an assessment, and they've also been helping us for the past 6 months, I would say, in getting us caught up. And this past year, we've had a turnover rate of over 70%. As you know, we've gone down to as low as 12 staff out of 20. And you saw how that worked or didn't work for us as a town with only 12 staff, really just taking care of emergencies, literally just keeping the lights on. And so it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been fun for the past 6 months or so. And we cannot get the work done that the community wants us to do. We cannot entertain the discussion of a dog park or sustainability or a true fire evacuation plan or all those different pieces when you're running on 12 staff. And so one of my main priorities, along with Corey and the rest of our team, was getting folks on board. And we believe in the next 2 months, especially, we're going to look very different than we have been in the last 8 or 9 months. And so with that, the main focus was recruiting and filling vacant positions along with our finance catch-up, provide stability for the town, and then be able to align and implement the town council priorities. And you've heard me talk about this over and over about the reset, refocus, and restructure as a town. So where are we at with Town Hall? Next slide, please. Town Hall status update is we've completed our PV refresh. As you know, we literally closed down Town Hall for 2 weeks and regathered staff and regrouped staff to be able to train amongst ourselves, talk about what was working, what was not. We came out with a new statement of values and we moved forward with that and we set new parameters moving forward. I thought that was very successful as we moved forward. I am very proud to announce that we are getting not only caught up, but we're making significant progress in our audits. As you know, we were 3 years behind, 3 fiscal years behind in our fiscal review, and we have completed now fiscal year 2021 through our auditors. And we have a draft financial statement that we just received. And so we are now into year 2 of the 3 years, and we're currently being audited for fiscal year 2021, 22. And then we will also be scheduling out 22 and 23 towards the end of this year. So by the end of this calendar year, we will be caught up on all those 3 fiscal years. And so that's great news and a testament to staff, to Christian Company, to everyone that's really put this at the forefront for us. And I thank council's support for allowing us to have Christian Company to be able to get this done. And so very proud of that achievement, if you will. We are finalizing the restructuring of staff. You've heard me talk about the reset, refocus, restructure. We cannot restructure forever. We cannot be in flux forever. I really do see this ending in the next month or 2 where we will have our full complement of staff, the right people in the right spots, and making sure that we have what we need to move forward as a town. Very excited. One of the things that, as you know, that we've been talking about is hiring our building and planning director and or we call it planning and building here, our planning and building director. And our planning and building director is here. He's here in the schoolhouse, Romeo. Romeo Herrera is here, and I will be introducing him formally at the town council meeting tonight as well. But major hurdle for us was not having a full-time permanent planning and building director. And Romeo brings a wealth of experience and also will be coming to us as a chief building official and building inspector. And so with that, there's some economies that we can accomplish as well. So we're excited to have Romeo here and his leadership. He has hit the ground running and he knows what's on his plate and where he's moving forward. And he's already having meetings and scheduling meetings with folks, not only with council and the community. We are also hiring our finance director. We have a contingent offer for a finance director out, and we're looking forward to getting that back. And once we have that back, we look forward to having a finance director, hopefully in the middle of May, to be able to hit the ground running, obviously with budget and everything else that we're doing. And then at the same time that we've done this restructure hiring of staff, we've hired our building and planning director. We have an offer out for our finance director, is we're implementing the items on the CRISH report. And CRISH report had that red, yellow, green assessment, if you will, the needs assessment for what needs to be addressed immediately in our finances, what needs to be addressed in the next 3 to 6 months, and what could be done at a later time. And so we're implementing those as we move forward. Our finance director, even in the interview process, we showed them and presented to them that CRISH report, so they know what they'll be the lead on as we move forward. And we've involved the finance committee. I'm not going into detail on the CRISH report here because I do encourage everyone to watch the last finance committee meeting where we actually went into detail and CRISH reported out to finance committee exactly where we were on those different items. Next slide, please. So to give us a baseline of where we're at as far as our town finances, and some of this might be repetitive for some of us, but we are a $12 million company. We are a $12 million agency. We happen to be a government agency. Of those $12 million in revenue that we receive, $8 million is in general fund. And so with those $8 million of general fund, that's really what we have control over as a town. That's what council has control over and the town staff have control over. The other $4 million might come through a grant or federal funding or state funding or have some sort of tax attached to it, such as our roads tax or roads revenue that come in through the door. It has to be spent on roads as we move forward. So as you all know, we started this fiscal year with a structural deficit of about $870,000. That's what was budgeted. And so what was presented in last year's budget was a deficit of $870,000, which means we're going to use $870,000 of reserves to balance the budget. This is not unusual. It's not unique to a town. There are many towns that are and cities that have a structural deficit that are faced with a structural deficit. However, ours is a little bit unique in that half of that structural deficit is because of the sheriff's contract. And so as you know, our sheriff's contract happens to be an $850,000 increase. And so when we built in the budget for this year, as opposed to the whole entire $850,000 increase, Sheriff Christina Corpus in the county of San Mateo was gracious enough to be able to say, we'll give you a discount, if you will, for this year of $450,000. You only have to pay $450,000 out of the 850. And so that was budgeted. We moved forward with that. But then coming in the next 2 months, that full bill of $850,000 would have been due. And obviously that would increase your structural deficit. So immediately when I came on board, Corey and I, we met with the county executive, Mike Callaghy. We met with Robert Manquilla, the CFO of San Mateo County. I showed them the CRIS report. I showed them our finances and where we were at, and basically requested from the county that they smooth over this increase, if you will, and help us move forward. And Mike Callaghy and Robert Manquilla, thanks to them, actually agreed to do a 3-year smooth over, if you will, a smoothing of these costs. So instead of the $850,000 bill being due on July 1st, we will have another year where we're able to pay half of that at $425,000. The next year would be $625,000, so a relief of 25%. And then the last year would be when the full amount is due, if you will. So just on those conversations, on that ability to talk to Mike Callaghy and Robert Manquilla, we're able to save the town over $1 million. And so we're very happy with that and very gracious and thankful for the county to help us with that. And so that we will build into the budget as we move forward. And make no mistake, that's with the promise and the commitment from town manager on our behalf to say, in that 4th year, we do have to pay the piper. We will pay that full amount. And that $850,000, by the time it gets to that 3rd and 4th year, it won't be $850,000. It'll be over $1 million based on inflation and costs and everything that we move forward. So we have some time, but we need to realize that that's $1 million bill as we move forward. I also made a commitment as your town manager to increase the visibility of the sheriff. And we talked about this a couple different times. The sheriff really wants to have a visible storefront, if you will, in the town and have a more user-friendly, resident-friendly place to meet with residents, for them to have a decent space. Right now they're in the courtyard, as you know, they have a cubicle in the courtyard, and they also share it with supplies and chemicals and things that are in there. And it's just not up to snuff, if you will. And so my commitment to the sheriff is that we are going to come back with a CIP project that I'll present to town council, where we're basically going to do an upgrade to the courtyard and carve out a spot for the sheriff that says, welcome to Portola Valley's Sheriff Station, and also have a spot for our town staff. And so that is basically a remodel. We're not building a building from scratch, but having the existing building that we have and making it up to snuff, if you will. Next slide, please. So when we talk about our funds for the town, this is a chart that shows you the $8 million that I talked about in general fund and where that money comes from. You can see right off the bat, we have a blue slice that's basically half of the pie. That's 46%. 46% right off the bat is property tax. The money that you pay in your property tax bill, 46% of our revenue that comes to the town is through that property tax. And this is very common, very typical, anywhere between 40 and 50% of property tax for almost all cities. So when property tax jumps, we jump. When property tax is down, we're down because it's half of your revenue. Portola Valley is unique, and we have a presentation in the last finance committee that went on for about an hour from our expert. I did contract with Paula Cohn, who's one of the leading authorities in property tax, that presented to finance committee the details of how we get this 46%. But because Portola Valley is a town, and because of Prop 13 and the things that were, the deals that were made in the 60s and 70s, property tax is based on growth, and it's also based on infrastructure, whether you have a community college or whether you have a hospital or whether you have different pieces. And obviously, because Portola Valley is a town and we've stayed a town, and by design, we don't have a hospital like Stanford. We don't have a community college like Los Altos Hills. That property tax remains stagnant and remains flat for many years. And so we receive about 4 cents on the dollar for all of your property tax. And you say, where does all my money go? Well, 4 cents on the dollar, up to about 6 cents on the dollar when it's all said and done with all these different calculations, comes to Portola Valley. So what that means is 95%, 94% of the cents on the dollar you pay in your property tax actually goes to county services, other city services, other different pieces. It does not come to Portola Valley. So if you look at Redwood City, if you look at Daly City, if you look at San Jose, they actually get 11, 12, 13 cents on the dollar on their property tax. And that's by design, by what they have as their infrastructure moving forward. Every year, property tax increases, as you know, just on the value of houses, the role, the assessment of your house as you move forward. And every year, most of the time, especially in California, especially in the Bay Area, property tax increases. Sometimes there's a dip, sometimes there's a decrease, But we're very fortunate in the Bay Area that property tax increase has actually never dipped below zero. If you look at on the other side of the bridge, if you look at other places, they've actually went down 20, 30% when you saw the last housing crisis, if you will. A bad year for Portola Valley or for the Bay Area would be where property tax growth is zero, where usually we actually get 5 or 6% growth year over year. The reason why I'm spending a lot of time on the property taxes, this has a big effect on our revenue moving forward. And so when property tax becomes stagnant, what happens is like when we were in COVID and we're in the middle of coronavirus, when folks wanted to move from Portola Valley from the Bay Area and they sold their house for a profit, whether they bought their house for $400,000 and sold it for $4 million, that obviously leads to a increase in your property tax. In the height of COVID, Portola Valley sold about 40 houses in that year. To give you an example of that, those are the people that moved out of state, out of country, to a different spot, to Sacramento. And that was the height of the selling boom, if you will. 10 offers on a house, 40 houses were sold. This year, as an example, and here we are, 4th year out of COVID, folks that wanted to sell, sold. Folks that wanted to move, moved. And so folks are staying put. And so for Portola Valley, we might finish this year selling 17 houses instead of 40, to give you an example. So that difference in growth obviously has an impact on our property tax moving forward. So there's a decrease in our growth. It's not the decrease in the actual revenue, but the growth that we depend on, obviously, to match inflation and everything that we're doing, that's decreasing. And that's about $200,000 or $300,000. So it's significant for a town of our size. The second piece is the state of California has always had this built-in mechanism, and you've heard of this before, where they've had a vehicle license fee. And there's also an ERAF fee, which is the education fund. And this vehicle license fee is called a vehicle license fee in lieu of property tax. So a portion of our vehicle license fee comes to towns, comes to cities to make up the difference of what the state is supposed to pay us and the counties are supposed to pay us in our property tax. Every year, the state for the past 5, 6 years have said, we're not going to give you this VLF tax. There's a shortfall. This VLF tax you're not going to get. Don't budget for it. And every year it's come. And some cities and towns budget for it and they receive it. Some don't budget for it and it might be gravy. And they say, okay, this is an extra because we didn't count on it. Myself as finance director, I personally always budgeted 50% of that. So half of it was gravy, if you will, not what you were expecting, and 50% you depended on it because it always came year after year. Well, guess what? Finally, the state of California is not giving it to us here. It's actually not in their budget. So they finally said what they were going to do, which is not include this VLF tax revenue for the cities. This shortfall just for San Mateo County is $30 million. It's huge, and it will increase year over year. So the county of San Mateo is not able to give the cities this $30 million. Our portion of that is about $400,000. So you can already start to look at the back of the napkin math to say, okay, we have a sheriff's contract that's increasing. We have a decrease in our property tax. We're not getting this VLF revenue, and you can see how this deficit will start to grow, and I'll show that as we move forward. There are other pieces on this slide where you can see charges for services. That's where we charge for our community development fees, for your permits, your fees as you move forward. There's also the utility users tax, and there's some much smaller ones here. The UUT tax, obviously something that we can take a look at. We've talked about that in the past, and that's the tax that you pay on your utilities, whether it's cable or phone, moving forward. Charges for services, we have control over that, and you can change your fees on what you charge. Obviously, we have a cost recovery model. Governments are not allowed to charge for more than what your services you have, but you can charge for what you need. You may be aware that we haven't had a user fee study for over 10 years. The last one was done in 2014. So we're well overdue for a user fee study. So basically, the cost of a building inspector to go out and look at something, the cost of staff to fill out that report, the cost to issue that permit, let's say it's $300. What we've done in the past for Portola Valley is we've had a CPI increase. We've increased that over year, but guaranteed when you do a full study of your user fees, it's not going to be $315 or $400. It might be $400 now. There's going to be a significant increase. So there's opportunity here to recover our costs and also make sure that we're recouping our dollars in this charges for services. I believe that's all I wanted to say on this slide. Next slide, please. Our general fund expenditures are pretty basic here, and I'll explain what these are. But basically, there's three categories. Two of them are in the orange and one is in our blue. We have our employee salaries and services, which are about $3.5 million or 43% of all of our expenses. So right off the bat, 45 cents on the dollar we spend on our staff, which makes sense. As you know, we don't have safety and fire in our own budget. If we had safety and fire, you would see this as 60 or 70% of our budget, because obviously you're paying for your police, you're paying for your fire. You could have a different slice here called sheriff's contract. You could slice this out all different ways, but then obviously your employee piece would be much higher. The other two categories that are under services and supplies are your legal fees and your consultant fees. Obviously, being a town of 20 staff, we're always going to have consultants in the town of Portola Valley. There are many things that we do that are outside our scope of the staff that we have. What we can do, obviously, is limit or be cognizant of the consultant use that we have, and then also obviously take a look at our legal fees. Unfortunately, given the housing element, given all of the mandates from the state, given all the pieces that we've done, legal fees are here to stay. They're not going to go away. It will never be zero. We obviously saw a huge piece this fiscal year and last fiscal year because of the housing element, but there's still always going to be some element of legal fees as we move forward. There's also pending litigation and other things that we dealt with as a town, and I'll go over that. And so that's basically where our money goes. You can see in that slice that we have the $8 million and we used $865,000 to balance that, if you will. Next slide, please. One of the things that we've been clamoring for as a group, all of us, is where are we at actual versus budget? And this is something that we weren't able to prepare for you in the past. I, as town manager, wasn't able to get this information. Cindy wasn't able to pull this information for you easily. And now we're able to finally get these numbers and be able to get a budget versus actual for you as a town. And so one of the things I want to talk about is where we are now as of April. And basically, when you talk about where you are as April, it might depend on where your entries are. It might be March or April. But what you can see is our salaries are below budget. And this is excluding benefits, just happens to be the line that we pulled is $2.5 million. And so our actuals are at about $2 million right now. And so we're projected to be at $2.2 million at the end of the year. Basic, snuff test, does that make sense? We've had so many vacancies, we've had so many positions not open. You would expect us to be under on our salaries and benefits for this fiscal year. Obviously, if we had a full complement of staff, you would expect that number to be higher. Obviously, what's, call it surprising, but not surprising, is we did have a budget approved by council of $180,000 for legal fees. And this is not just city attorney fees, this is legal fees in all generalities and all pieces. And so this is your housing element. This is your meetings that are being covered by a town attorney. These are all the legal matters that we're doing as a town. And so you can see that we're projected to be at $430,000. So well over double for this fiscal year. At some point, you would be able to say, well, maybe we budgeted too low, and we probably did, or we were being optimistic at the end of the year. So next year, we'd have to figure out what we want to do as a budgeted number. We'd also pull out some of these legal fees that were due to pending litigation or to the housing element that were one time that are not going to be repeated. However, these legal fees will continue as we move forward. And then also we have our consultant fees of $620,000, and we're actually projected to be lower than that. This is straight math. I took it straight from the finances. Cindy provided these to me. There may be something that's one time in May or June that's not accounted for, but at the end of the day, we're still under budget when it comes to consultants. Next slide, please. So how did we get here? This is kind of the discussion of where we are, where we're going, and where we're heading. And so obviously when you have a structural deficit, you don't have enough revenue to cover your expenses. And as I mentioned before, nearly every city in the Bay Area, if not all, have some sort of structural deficit. Over 21 cities in the Bay Area have already had some sort of established ballot measure, revenue measure, something to be able to increase their revenue moving forward. The current model of all cities that we have just doesn't sustain where we're going. Obviously, some towns are in trouble because they have an unfunded liability that they can't get to. Other towns have something that's going on with their safety contracts. Another town might have something to do with different pieces. Ours is unique because we talk about our sheriff's contract, and then we also have our legal fees and our different pieces. So when you have, that perfect storm, if you will, of increased costs, you're getting out of a COVID pandemic, you have your legal fees, and then you have stagnant revenue, you're obviously going to come up with a surplus. You're going to come up short as a town. And so showing you the last 4-year history, if you will, is rather than having these large surpluses, which the town was used to, in 2021, for example, we were $41,000 over budget, over revenue, if you will, which is basically break even. Same thing with the following year, $100,000 out of $12 million statistically is, zero. You broke even as a town. And you could see it shift. You're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in surplus every year. Then we began the deficit of last fiscal year, which was at about $420,000. We used reserves to cover that $420,000. That deficit is growing where we're expected to use $800,000. And then you start doing the back of the napkin math, which I'm talking about. So if you have an $800,000 projected deficit, $400,000 for your property tax shortfall, and then you're going to have to pay your $400,000 to the sheriff's contract eventually, you're at 1.2 million, $1.5 million. So that's what we need to solve for. What I wanted to mention here is structural deficits are not scary to me, myself, as a former finance director. I've dealt with structural deficits in nearly every city and every town. It's normal to have a structural deficit every once in a while in a city's history. And so this doesn't intimidate me per se. It shouldn't intimidate us. Everything has a solution, and we have time for this solution. And that's what we're going to be talking about moving forward. Next slide. There are a lot of numbers on this page, and I don't expect you to read all these numbers, but I wanted to make sure that the numbers that I took were straight off of our approved council budget, if you will, from last year. So we have reserves, we have money in the bank, we have a savings account as a town. And if you look at the 2 green lines, we have 2 types of accounts. One is called general purpose funds or unrestricted, and the other one is called restricted funds. Basically, for simplicity purposes, general purpose funds are funds that council in any given day can repurpose. You could tonight in your meeting, if it was on the agenda, repurpose these funds and call them what you want and move the money where you want, because these are general fund dollars. That's under council purview. You then would have our restricted funds, whether it be Measure A or Measure W or a gas tax or something for streets and roads. You have 2 major ones here, which are your open space and your inclusionary and lieu funds. And so those, although they can be changed, it's much more difficult to change those because they're either set by Muni Code or set by voter statute or different pieces. So one of the things that I would recommend immediately is that we go through Finance Committee and really take a look at our general purpose funds. And every 3 to 5 years, your needs are going to change. You might want to have an emergency fund if you had an emergency. You might want to have a CIP fund with a couple $1 million on it because you're building a building. You might change that and have a dog park fund because you want to build a dog park. But these can change at any given time. So at the end of the day, even though these are called your OPEB fund or your equipment replacement assignment or your unfunded retiree medical OPEB, at the end of the day, this $5 million, you can name them what you want and you can move them how you want. And in every city that I've worked at, I've reorganized those reserves with Finance Committee to match what we're doing. And so, for example, in the city of Los Altos, they had $45 million in reserves and it was all sitting in one account. We actually changed that to call it a community center fund. And they built a community center. They used the rest of the funds for emergencies or for different pieces. And so I am also, and you've heard me talk about this before, money is meant to be spent. We as a town are not meant to just save money and hoard money. It's meant to be spent. There's also the value of money, if you will. So if we have a fund for $670,000 for unfunded pension liability, if it just sits there for years, we're actually losing our purchasing power. Let's actually buy it. Let's actually write a check for our pension liability and get it off our books. If we're not going to use it for OPEB, let's use it for something else. Because $670,000 now is much different than $670,000 3 years from now, as an example. If we have an unfunded retiree medical OPEB, let's write a check and get that off our books if we need to and get that liability down. If not, let's move this $550,000 to the general fund and increase that to make that $3.5 million or $4 million. So there's flexibility there. One of the interesting things as your new town manager, I didn't know that I was learning about our reserves is, for example, when we have our UUT tax, in our Muni Code, we actually take 7.5% right off the bat of our UUT tax, and 5% goes to our general fund reserve, and 2.5% goes to open space, right? 5.5 and 2%. Thank you. So 5.5 and 2% go automatically into these restricted funds. Well, as you can see, you have an open space over $8 million on the right-hand column. So $8 million, number one, as your town manager, I would recommend not only you spend it, use it, it's there. You're losing purchasing power. The more you move out, the less purchasing power you have because things are getting more expensive. Also, $8 million in the grand scheme of thing of open space is not that much money. You're not going to buy tons of acreage with $8 million. So let's either spend it or use it in a way that we can utilize it. At the same time, you can turn that faucet off and through a muni code change, through council direction, through other means, let's turn off that 2% and let's put it back into general fund as an example or as an idea. And so these are all thoughts that we would run by finance committee. I've given the preview to George Savage and to be able to say, let's look at all these things and let's see what is the best use for the town because they haven't been utilized. And so we have money, we have funds. When you take a look at that $5 million, if you say you have $1.5 million deficit, you do the back of the napkin math, well, we have about 3 years to figure out what we're going to do as a town to be able to either increase revenue, decrease our expenses, or move forward. And that's basically what the discussion is moving forward. Next slide, please. So we talked about the reorganization of reserves. That should come from a recommendation from staff and finance committee. This should be annualized and looked at every year. And so what happens is when you have your year-end close and you do your ACFR or your financial statements, that's usually takes about 6 months after you close out your books. When you have your mid-year review, this is the time when you should come back as a town and say, we closed out our books last year of this amount of money. This is how much money we have or don't have. And here's what we should do with the money. And the very interesting way or the official way of saying it is you need to assign your unassigned fund balance. So you have an unassigned fund balance. Town manager comes to the council and says, we want to assign that fund balance. So if you have $200,000 left over, you say, we'd like to put it in this account, that account, whatever it may be. Obviously, if when there's a shortfall, you have to be able to say, we came up short and we used X amount of reserves to get there. But that should be done on an annual basis. And then the annual review of reserves and policy, that should go to finance committee. It could be a 10-minute discussion, no changes this year, and you move on. Or you would change your policy or change your reserves based on your needs. This slide here, next slide, please. This slide here started out as a whiteboard, if you will. Started out in my office, started out first as a piece of paper, then it was a whiteboard, and then ended up on this slide. And I realized it's a crude slide, the graphics are simple, but I felt the need to just keep it and save it this way. And I presented this all to council. They've seen this a couple times. I also presented this to finance committee. And basically what this is it's that back of the napkin math that says we're in fiscal year 2023. We're in the middle of our reset, refocus, restructure, making sure we have the right staff in the right place. And we have our expenses of, a $450,000 sheriff's increase. We have an increase in legal fees, we have an increase in consulting fees. And then we have 2 fiscal years moving out. One of the first discussions we had when I first came was obviously there was discussion about having a ballot measure for a parcel tax. And I, as your new town manager, immediately said, nope, let's wait. I'm not comfortable. I don't think council would be comfortable asking the town, asking the community for more money when we don't know where our money's going. Let's audit it first. Let's make sure that our finances have integrity and we can come back. And I feel that we'll be there in very short order, that we know our finances have integrity. We've cleaned up what we need to do. And now we can finally ask the town for money wherever that may be. And so in order to do that, we'd have to have a special election. So we did not have our parcel tax or whatever measure that we're going to have in the November 24 election. It would need to be at some next election. Well, the next cycle would be, I don't know what the official term of it's called, but it's when the senator reruns, and that's basically in 26. 26 is a little too far out for the town of Portola Valley. So what we'd like to do and what we're suggesting is we probably have a special election in fiscal year 25, 26. So it'd be next year, next November, if you will. That costs a little bit of money. It's not a ton of money, but it does cost to have a special election. But basically in that special election, you would have certain measures on that ballot. In that ballot, you would ask the town for some sort of action. You would ask the voters for some sort of action. And you may have heard me talk about this in the past. Some of the food for thought would be, what if we're a charter town? Right now, we are a general city town. The state of California has severely limited the town and city's ability to raise revenue. It's not like it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It was a much easier decision to be a charter town or a general law town or city because there are so many things you could do as a town and give you a lot of flexibility. basically, because of all these restrictions that have come from the state, because of these mandates that have come through, the only real difference now, when it really comes down to it between a charter town and a general law town, is the ability to charge a document transfer tax. The document transfer tax is the tax that a new owner pays when they purchase a home. And that could be 5%, 7%, 10%. And so basically what we would do is do a feasibility study, because being a charter town is expensive. It's expensive in legal fees. It costs, I think, millions of dollars from what I've last heard to be able to navigate all that bureaucracy, if you will, paperwork to become a charter town. So what we'd have to do is, if we implemented a document transfer tax and we received, I'll make up a number, $200,000 a year from this tax, would it be worth it in the long run if we spent $2 million to get there? Might not be. We might look at that and then not do that. Another piece that we looked at was obviously a parcel tax. If we're a town of 4,200, 4,500 people and we have 2,000 parcels or 1,800 parcels at $1,000, that's $1.8 million. That's still not a magic bullet that's going to last you for 10 years in your revenue moving forward, but it's something obviously to look at. And parcel tax probably is one of the best ways to get there. Other pieces that I, as your town manager, want to bring to the table and be able to have food for thought, doesn't mean that I'm advocating for this or want this per se, but we need to take a look at it, is an example of annexing. What if we were to annex Ladera? What if we were to annex Los Trancos Woods? What would be the benefit of doing that? If you annex Ladera, for example, you might be able to increase your property tax because of the folks that are paying property tax there. You also would boost your sales tax with the businesses that are there. Is the dollar amount worth it to pursue that? What would it take to get there? We don't know yet. That would be something that we would ask Finance Committee and staff to take a look at. I want to think even further outside the box because I want to provide you a menu of options and you cross out those options as you go. I am not naive. I am not stupid enough as your town manager to come and say, we need a Costco in Portola Valley. We want a Walmart. We're not going to go there. However, if you were to annex Ladera as an example, what if you had a boutique hotel along 280, along the corridor? And if you had a small hotel there, that would actually generate TOT, which is transient occupancy tax. TOT is one of the easiest ways for a town to generate revenue because it's passive revenue. Someone else builds the building, someone else provides the business and the service, or you receive the tax. I'm not saying that's an option. I'm saying at least we need to review that option. We could cross it off the list if it doesn't work for us. There are other pieces where we own land as a town. There are different pieces of land. If we were short on cash, what if we sold a piece of land to have that cash to buy us an extra year, to buy us an extra fiscal year moving forward? So there's all these things that are on the table and I'll share those. And basically, there are two options at the end. And this could very easily be a doomsday slide where I could come in as your town manager and say, we have 3 years, the countdown is on, we're gonna run out of money in 3 years and we gotta, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have 3 years to make a plan. We have 3 years to move forward. We don't have the ability to say, we are a town, our town ethos is small, we want to stay small, we want Portola Valley to stay Portola Valley and not do anything. Unfortunately, the fiscal model and the town ethos of staying small contradict. That's not something that we made up, but something has to give, whether it's increasing our revenue or changing the town. And we are not suggesting we change the town. What we're saying is we keep the town the way we want, we keep our town ethos, but we have to find new revenue streams to get there. And so what I've called this initiative is PV Thrive, something that I made up. We can change the name, we can change what we need to do. But basically PV Thrive is what can we do in the next 3 years to make sure we thrive as a town, to make sure we stay Portola Valley. And so this PV Thrive, if we don't want PV to thrive, we can be unincorporated San Mateo County in 3 years. Take the easy way out, right? And I'm just speaking on what would happen if we didn't make any changes. However, if we do want to do this, this is your next slide, please. I will get, oh, let's go back, Cindy, sorry. So this PV Thrive is basically a strength-based town initiative for 3 years involving Finance Committee and Council on how we can get a sustainable fiscal model moving forward. This is your Keep Tahoe Blue bumper sticker. This is your Save Portola Valley. This is your sign in your front yard, right? Portola Valley Thrive. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. Next slide, please. So what have I done as your town manager? As I mentioned, going back to the reset, refocus, restructure, is that we did close down our town hall and reset staff. I then, along with Assistant Town Manager Corey Stalker and the rest of staff, we evaluated all positions within the town. And we began evaluation of our consultant use and our legal fees. Where's our money going? Who do we utilize? For what reason? Who's certified? Who's not? And we also tried to immediately make sure that we have the right people in the right spots. And this is where I'm going to spend just a second to talk about the awkwardness of restructure. I did not mince words when I said restructure. Restructure means putting the right people in the right spot, whether that's accepting someone's resignation, whether that's asking someone to leave, whether that's replacing someone's position, not replacing someone's position, or changing the position altogether. I'm truly restructuring, and you've seen that over time. And unfortunately or fortunately, the town is not always privy to all those changes that happen. But we are restructuring and making sure that we have the right people in the right spot. What we also did was we immediately changed a benefit structure for staff. The town of Portola Valley in the past have approved where we actually pay the employer and employee portion for their retirement, their PERS. So if I have my retirement, you have, let's call it a 10% that the employee is supposed to pay, the town would actually pay that portion. We actually turned that off immediately when I got here along with Corey. We made that decision. New employees do not get that match. They have to pay their own portion, which is basically what's set by stature. And that is a significant amount of money moving forward, savings moving forward. I know that we can't change forever, as I mentioned. These changes have to happen, and then we have to start getting about the business of the business. And I expect all those changes to happen by June 30th. So in very short order, this month and next month, we'll be done with those changes. It was also very clear to me as your town manager that you cannot operate without 20 staff. So I'm keeping the same 20 number. I'm not increasing the number of staff here. It is 20. There's just a different 20, if you will, or a different, 10 out of 20 that might be called something different or have a different function. But you cannot operate the town of Portola Valley on 12 staff. You cannot operate on 15 staff. You saw how we were operating on 12 staff and 15 staff, and it was a disaster. It did not work. We're barely keeping the lights on. We're barely answering the phones. We're barely keeping up with state mandates. If we really want to thrive and really want to get to sustainability and get to fire evacuation and get to a dog park and get to all the fun stuff that we want to do as a town, we have to have those 20 staff. Next slide, please. So we have our 3-year outlook, and basically we have to turn our deficit into a surplus. Obviously, it's not good enough just to have a balanced budget, because in 2 or 3 years, you'll be right back where you were because of the increase in costs and increase in inflation and the different pieces. So we need to shoot for a surplus. And basically a budget is only part of the plan. Obviously, we need to use reserves to get there in the next 2 or 3 years. And then a key function that's been missing for the town are mid-year reports. You have to have your finance director and your town manager come back at mid-year, tell you where you are as a town, where are your budgets and actuals, and if you need to course correct in the middle of the year, you course correct, so that you don't wait till the end of the year and becomes not only a surprise, but you're not able to change that. So we need to plan for surpluses year after year so that we can operate with a model that the revenues are over our expenses. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this is your Portola Valley Thrive. I obviously picked a tree for a reason. I picked the roots of the tree for a reason. This is the logo according to Sharif. We can change this. You can change the name. You can change the picture. But basically, this is your Keep Tahoe Blue. This is we need to thrive as a town, and it's a 3-year initiative. And so we want to review all expenditures. We want to introduce revenue enhancement strategies and basically have all of the town involved in some way to be able to get to our Portola Valley Thrive, if you will. Next slide. So finance committee is going to be key in this. We want finance committee's expertise. We want their suggestions. Finance committee is a town council committee, obviously, and in conjunction with staff and the town manager, finance director, we would like the finance committee to take an instrumental role in evaluating ideas for revenue generation and taking these ideas, fleshing them out, and being able to say, okay, finance committee reviewed this initiative. It's not going to work for Portola Valley. We're going to take it off the list. It's not even going to go to council. Finance committee has reviewed this along with staff. We think this has significant traction. We think this is the right way to go, and have that presented to council for future consideration. And so with that and looking at financial policy moving forward, finance committee, I think, will be quite busy and quite involved in the next couple of years. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit of a repeat, but just reiterating, what are some of the possible revenue generation measures? What's our menu to choose from? You could do none of these. You can do all of these. You can do some of these. We just don't know until we evaluate these. The interesting thing about all of these measures, as you know, is the old adage of it takes money to make money. So in any of these things, to gather revenue and to be thriving as a town, it's going to cost money, whether it's legal fees or consultant fees or polling or different pieces. So each one of these will have some sort of cost to get us over that hurdle, if you will. And so one of the things as your new town manager, and as here we are almost in May, is that we won't have time to implement or put some of these things in our budget. And so one of the things that I'd like to do, and I think you've done this in the past, is we'd like to come back with a September revise. And so we'll present a June budget, we'll get that budget approved by council, sit down with finance committee along with our new finance director and have a September revision that has a little bit more substance to it, if you will, and can build in some of these costs to say, we need X amount of dollars to pursue some of these measures. Next slide, please. So very quickly, I only have 3 slides left. We had our council priority setting session. And one of the things that I asked for as council saw this whiteboard presentation, if we have the Save Portola Valley, the PV Thrive, is we need to have council priorities, but we also want them to be realistic. What can we realistically attain in the next year, year and a half? So not only are our council priorities up until next fiscal year, ending in June of 2025, they're also realistic. And we're going to go over those tonight as well, where we're actually accepting the council priorities, and we'll implement those and talk about those moving forward. But I'm very pleased that we were able to have a realistic lens because we didn't want to overpromise and underdeliver. And so that plays into a part of everything that we do here are our council priorities. Next slide, please. So with that, when we have our priorities moving forward, obviously something has to give. We're going to have new things that come along as a town. There's going to be new and shiny things that we're going to want to implement. We're not going to be able to get to those. If you want to get to a new priority or something that's not on our list, that's fine. But what's going to come off our list? So you want to put something on the list, something else needs to be taken off. At the same time, I believe we should create an unfunded list. It's not uncommon for towns and cities to have an unfunded list or a wish list. Call it what you may, call it a bocce ball court. You put that on unfunded list. Funding comes along or becomes a priority, you move that to the funded list and vice versa. And I think this will help us as a town as we move forward. And then anything that's additional services, there's no such thing as free, as you all know. So if someone wants to come in and build a free building, right, it comes at a cost, and we have to build that ongoing maintenance. Perfect example is our beautiful community hall. We have a beautiful community hall. We did not, as a town, build in the maintenance. The maintenance is a huge expense moving forward. So if someone was to come in, someone was to donate, we'll certainly look at that. The council can certainly evaluate. Finance committee should come up with a very robust donation policy moving forward, but then we can talk about whether you as a town would accept that moving forward. This is my last slide. And so basically, what's for discussion today as we move forward, and we do not have to end at 7 o'clock. This can be continued to the evening if we need to. It can be continued to a different day. But today really this is a lot of information, a lot to digest, but the recommendations are to create an action plan and create initial estimates of some of these measures moving forward. Have council agree to the notion of a June budget with a September revision. Some of the low-hanging fruit that we can do immediately is obviously still continue to look at our consulting fees and our legal fees. We can begin a user fee study immediately. We can start to RFP for that. Council, I believe, has already approved for us to move forward for a user fee. We just didn't have the capability to do that. But that's something that we can take a look at. And then we can start engaging the finance committee for all the different pieces that we talked about. I know we as a town, I'm going to make a bad joke, we get very subcommittee and committee happy in Portola Valley. But we can also have work groups. It doesn't have to be as formal as a subcommittee. We can have work groups work on some of these measures, work on some of the research, and have us do our homework, if we will, as a town moving forward. And so with that, I purposely had a kind of closing statement, if you will. And I think it needs to be said, and whether it's stating the obvious or not stating the obvious. But while we may not all agree on where we go from here, whether it's housing or finances or other projects, it's my hope and intention that we all agree we want to preserve Portola Valley, keep our town ethos, and allow Portola Valley to thrive for decades to come. It's my hope that this PV Thrive initiative unites us and unites us all in this common toward goal of us preserving Portola Valley. So with that, those are my closing remarks.
Thank you, Sharif. I think that was an excellent and super thorough presentation. And I hope, everybody in the community and here on the dais agrees, that level of background. I've been doing this for 3.5 years and we haven't had, we just haven't had the transparency into these things. And so, I'm just grateful for all your hard work that's gone on to get us to this point and laying it out in a way that gives us, a list of good things to consider for moving forward. So I want to open it up at this point for oral communications, people from the community. And this can be both on this agenda item and not on this agenda item, correct? Or what would you prefer?
So this study session is just for this topic. There will be an opportunity at the 7 o'clock regular meeting under oral communications for items not on the agenda.
Okay. All right. So this is oral communications just on for comments on the presentation. And so looking on Zoom, not seeing any hands raised for questions. One hand raised. And in the schoolhouse, I'd love to start here. If there are, please, whoever would like to go first, please come up and sure, come on up and let us know your name. And we typically have, for those of you who are new to the process, we typically have 3 minutes for oral communications. Thank you.
It's red, is that good? Hi, thank you. I'm Maida Jones. I've lived here for 25 years, come July. Thank you very much, Sharif, for this forward look at our town. As Sarah mentioned, I think it's much needed. I've never felt as well informed in the years that I've been attending meetings or Zooms of meetings, so I appreciate it so much. Thank you. However, I do have some questions which I'd like to pose. I don't know that they all need to be answered right now, but I hope at least some of them will be considered as you move forward. And I hope to be in future meetings as a listener. First of all, I'm sure this was handled during the budgeting, but when the sheriff asked for such a huge increase in their fees, did they say what we were going to get for that? Are there increased measurements of performance? And the reason I ask that is for 25 years, I've seen the sheriff's presence on our roads decline. And, during COVID, we all know that drivers got more aggressive. And I haven't seen almost any cars looking around for speeding on our roads. I only have 3 minutes, but I think that's something, I hope you brought it up. But if not, hopefully, it's something that could be considered in the future. In terms of the property value, the tax that we get from property sales, it seems to me that the COVID 40, was it, you said houses were sold, that was a bump. That was an unusual rise. And I'd be interested in knowing what the normal number, sort of the ongoing usual number of properties, of houses sold in PV would be. I guess you said it was 17 this last year, maybe neighborhood of 17 to 20. It seems to me that before we say that we've come into a steep decline in property tax revenue, that may be compared to COVID, but we need to look at the normal quote unquote revenue rate from sales prior to that bump. Also, values of houses in Portola Valley as well as everywhere else, but certainly in our town, they're going up, not down. I sold my house tomorrow. It'll be a year ago that I sold my Portola Valley home and moved to the Sequoias. And, the value increase was extraordinary. Well, it was 25 years. But I think people who are here for shorter, well, we all know this. I don't have to spend my time on that. Anyway, I think we can also factor into our revenue projections an increase in the value of the properties that will be sold in the future, in addition to the number of properties that will be sold. We might not have a good way of projecting that, but we could use the ongoing amount? Am I almost out of time?
We're out. Sorry.
Okay. I just want to say, I hope all these funds in the reserves are invested. I'm sure they are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Um,
if I may, I was remiss. Forgive me, George. George is here on our dais. He's joining us today as obviously our Chair of Finance Committee. And I wanted to ask George if you had anything you wanted to add to my presentation. We did talk about it earlier
Oh.
today. Forgive me, George, for not closing with.
Oh, it's no
Your
problem
response.
at all. I just want to echo what's already been said by Sarah and the commentator, Maya, so far. Thank you very much for a very thorough presentation. I applaud the work you've done in the last 8 months of getting us on track to get these audits all wrapped up, figuring out our true financial status, and now beginning a very organized process of considering all the options. And, we can look at the Costco option that was flippantly thrown out there as an extreme that we wouldn't consider here in town. And then on the other extreme, you have the slash and burn all the expenses thing that won't work. And so the key thing is what options will work for the town. And so what we need to do is start talking about what options are available, what we can do as a finance committee and recommend and actually get through, and then take input from the public as you walk around town to figure out what will work. But it's clear to me that we're in an inflationary environment where property tax of an established residence can only go up 2% a year by law. Our costs are going up much faster than that. Home sales are down because people don't want to trade into a more expensive mortgage. And we have more mandates from the state that are unfunded. We all are, wrestling with housing element. That's just one of them that's very prominent. And at the same time, the state faces a very big deficit, so they're clawing back funds wherever they can. So we have an issue, but as you pointed out, Sharif, we have a plan, we have time, so we're in pretty good shape.
Thank you, George. Any other hands raised in the schoolhouse before I go to Zoom? First up on Zoom is Carolyn Vertonghen. Carolyn?
Great, good evening. First of all, and thank you for allowing us to participate. My husband and I, we have been a homeowner in this community for 30 years and we love it. We've always been participating like many other residents. And it's refreshing to have a town manager who seems to start to understand. And apologize for my skepticism because we have been promised a lot in the last 5 years. And I'm sorry, I think many residents have done their due diligence and have brought up concerns over many years for this town, and we were ignored. So yes, I'm not frustrated anymore. I'm mad because we warned the town council. So, let's continue on a positive note. I really appreciate the presentation. Unfortunately, I missed the first half hour, so I apologize if I'm saying something that was covered there. But the sheriff contract, like Maya said, is a big burden, and we have not seen services. There's other things, and I hope that the town manager and town council will start listening to the residents who really spent their time and efforts to make this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next up is Peter Lippman.
Thank you for a really informative presentation. As a resident of, I think, 35 years in Portola Valley and having lived in what became Portola Valley when I was a graduate student 60 years ago, I have a better understanding now, I think, than I ever have before. I have a kind of simple question about finances, though, that maybe there's a simple answer to. In the revenue budget pie diagram you showed with increments down to as small as $100,000, where does income from the $20 million of reserve show up? With a treasury note at 5%, that should be something like $1 million a year right there. That's my question. Thank you.
Next up, and what I should have said, because this format is more casual than our typical, we will, can we circle, are you taking notes, Sharif? Can we circle back? And I'm taking some, but I think there's some that you're going to know the answers to better than me. Okay, thank you. So we will be circling back and answering these questions when we get to the end of it. And I think we have one additional hand raised here, Rita Comas.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. And I won't repeat what Carolyn had said because, yeah, like she said, this is way overdue. And many residents have been showing up at the finance meetings and other meetings and talking about year-end financials and overdue audits, and way before, you know, our new town manager showed up. And so it's nice to feel that there's been some traction, but please know that there was lots of promises in the past. And as we move forward, I really hope that we have a review of all of our contracts that we have, you know, it's from the smallest to the largest, an audit / review of all the contracts, clarity of all of our financial software that we've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for. But at the same time, I think we were using 3, and I think there was a new software that has just been purchased. And so just have things kind of a little more succinct. And when numbers are being promised, that the residents can then go in and actually see those numbers. Like I've always wondered, you know, the previous town manager came to all the committee meetings talking about the special donation fund and doing presentations. But anytime the residents have asked how much money was ever collected, there's been no number. Maybe other people have heard a number, but I've never heard a number and have never been able to find a number. And also to something I've asked for time and time again in the past, and I'm sure perhaps the consultants we've hired are doing this, but to code items based on projects. Earlier, you spoke about the fees for the attorney and saying, oh, not all of it is about the housing element. Well, it would be really nice if it was coded and certain hours were housing element. I know in the contract, there's a different cost. So obviously that attorney group is charging us based on the cost of the different projects. It would be nice to see that reflected in the warrant list and in in that expensive financial software that we bought, that we were promised that once it was up and running, that we would be able to go in and see all kinds of things. And so those are my comments. This is traction, but at the same time, we have been promised this kind of traction in the past. So now I think all of the town is waiting for results. This audit that is now being finished, it'd be nice to hear as soon as possible when it is actually finished and the financials are finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rita. We have one additional hand raised here in the schoolhouse.
Hi, good evening, Greg Franklin. Excellent presentation, Sharif. Just looking at all the revenue opportunities that were listed here, there's impact fees was the last one, but as a result of the housing element, there's significant upzoning going to go on in this town. We've already seen them. We're going through a zoning exercise now on Alpine Road where most of the development will be, but there's a substantial windfall profit creation that's going to result from at least 3 of the 5 of you voting for the new ordinances, and of course all the opt-in opportunities of rezoning. So the property owners who are going to benefit from this upzoning, whether they're opt-in residents, owners, or the property owners, including out-of-town owners, are going to benefit from the upzonings taking place now. I mean, I've done some calculations I've shared with some of you that on one lot that's actually in the housing element, which is one of the NAFWAS properties, there's potential windfall profit of $5 to $7 million for that property owner. Once the minute you rezone the property, that property has potentially $5 to $7 million additional value. So the question is really a fairness one: is the burden of our structural deficit, should that fall on this 4,500 residents of Portola Valley? Or is there some way of a sort of a sharing mechanism where the windfall profits that are going to result from the housing element. So I don't know how quite you implement that, but yeah, I think if you ask most residents in town, would you prefer a parcel tax or to share a fair share of the windfall profits created from the upzoning? I have a fair guess of what the answer would be if you put that to a town referendum. So I think that's a significant revenue opportunity. That's big numbers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've got one more hand raised on Zoom. Christy Corley.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you're looking into developmental or impact fees and producing a nexus study. I noticed in San Mateo County, they are looking at their fees and redoing their nexus studies. And that would be another form of revenue. And then looking into whether we're a general city or another type of city. I think I'd like to see that studied more and how that might benefit us or not benefit us. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Any other hands raised here in the schoolhouse before we, and I don't see any additional hands raised on Zoom. So, Sharif, do you want to?
Yeah, if I may, I could answer a couple questions real
Yeah,
quickly, and I'd love to
sure.
hear council. This is the first time us as a group obviously are seeing this.
Yeah.
Some of the information as mentioned, like interest income, I can certainly, we can parse that out and separate that out in our next presentation so we can see what is coming from interest income. Obviously, you can present these two slides, the revenue expense slides, 10 different ways. And so we can bring those different types of detail to a future meeting so you can see where interest income is, where other pieces are. We do code for our legal fees. We do know what fees are due to a pending litigation versus an employee issue versus a housing element versus zoning. And we can certainly parse that out too. So it's a fine balance of how you bring the information for today's purpose. Not too much information, but at the same time enough to spark the conversation, if you will. So we can certainly tailor that for future meetings. Another question I was going to answer, I don't remember. Oh, impact fees were on my slide. We do want to look at impact fees moving forward. All of these things come at a cost, and so we have to see what those costs are. The Nexus study is on there as well. The full Nexus study, that's huge for a town of our size. Some of those easy wins, like we talked about the user fee study, and basically everything's on the table, and we need to go through those, evaluate those, and then bring those back to council to see what's the best for the town moving forward. I don't think there's a magic bullet in all of this. I don't think a parcel tax, for example, is going to solve everything. I think it's going to be a mixture of 3 or 4 different items at 3 or 4 different ways to get there, if you will.
That's helpful. 2 other ones that I recall is, do we know Cindy, maybe you do, what's a typical number of sales a year? Or maybe Jeff, you do. I think it is closer. I mean, we can easily get that information, but I think it is closer to about 20
Yeah, it is closer to 20.
Yeah.
is typical, but we can follow up and get that.
Yeah. And to be clear on the property tax so that we're all clear, it's not property tax is going down per se. The growth of property tax is going down. So every year we experience growth of 5, 6, 7%. That's not going to be 5% next year. It might be 3%. And you pair that with the loss of the vehicle license fee, then that's where you get that $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 deficit, if you will. The vehicle license fee, that loss technically would be here to stay. There's obviously huge lobbying on the county level in Sacramento to get that back for the town, but that would be to stay. The decrease in the growth of property tax, that ebbs and flows. You might have a 7% growth one year, you might have a 2% the other. So that's going to come back and forth as we go. It's that really the harder part is that vehicle license fee that we're losing starting this year and next year as well.
So I remember, I think it was in our priority setting. Was it in the priority setting where you had a good chart that showed the property tax decline, ebbs and flows rather? Just food for thought. That might be a good thing to add if you're going to be posting this on the website, because I do think the nuance that you just explained there is important.
What we can do, just thinking off the cuff when we're talking with George, what I can do is we'll go ahead and post my slides tomorrow.
Mhm.
And what we can do is then also post the presentations from the finance committee meeting, which was the
Oh,
Chris.
that's what it
the
was.
Chris
It was in the
presentation.
finance committee meeting.
And then there's a very, very detailed, almost mind-boggling report from our consultant on our
That's
property
perfect.
tax. And so you can get as detailed as you want in there because it's pretty.
That would be
significant.
great. Yep, that was good information. The other thing that came up, I think, Maida, was your question about the sheriff's contract. So we have had, I think, at least 2 study sessions on the sheriff's contract. So I refer you to those where we get into the detail about what the services are. We had both the people from the sheriff's department, including our local captain, as well as the people from San Mateo County Sheriff's Office Finance Department here at one of them. And we talked about basically that, both the costs and the services. So there's a lot of information available there. So I'm happy to share that with you. Is there any other questions that you guys can remember that came up that maybe we could answer before we go on to our own questions? Because I know we're already coming up against.
When was the plans for, at some point in the future, will our accounting system enable reports that allow to an understanding beyond just, for example, legal fees, like what went to the housing element? Is that something that's currently envisioned for the reporting, or is that something to be taken back? And looked
Yes,
at?
it is something that's built into the modules and we will be bringing those forward. So this is about as basic as you can get. In our financials, we're going to get much more detailed and we'll have much more detailed information moving forward, especially when it comes to a mid-year report and a quarterly report. The first quarter report really doesn't have much to it because you don't receive revenue. It's really a mid-year and a third quarter where you're going to see those details and you can see line by line kind of where we're at. And so that's in the works. And Cindy's been working on that for quite some time as well.
All right, so maybe we'll bring it back to council for council questions on Cherie's presentation. Anybody want to start?
I think in terms of actual questions, I really just have one. And this is for Catherine. A few years ago, we had impact fees. There was a court ruling that struck down impact fees broadly. There's now what's the current legal status of impact fees?
Generally speaking, they are allowed so long as they're supported by user study that documents that the fee does not exceed the cost of providing the service. I do recall perhaps there was a road maintenance fee or some sort of very specific fee, road impact fee that was struck down. And I don't believe there's been any change in the legal status of that, but that is something I will look into.
But broadly speaking, their impact fees are still an option.
Correct.
Is that what specific one was?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's the only question.
I was interested in the windfall profit tax and how that would interact with the housing element and whether that would even be legal in this climate.
I'll take a stab at that, unless Sherry, if you have any thoughts. I think, so I think the question was in regards to how just the fact that upzoning generally results in a windfall to that property owner. And that is, I guess, sort of, it is a function of the state requirement to upzone certain parcels and a function of council level policy decisions in terms of which parcels those would be. As far as a means to extract, basically to claw back some of that windfall, I am not aware of one. And I don't know if this is something the Finance Committee has discussed, but I'm not aware of a mechanism to do that for the city.
Thank you.
I have a bunch of questions. I'll try to make them quick. So on the interest, where did you put the interest? I mean, I get you could break it out, but presumably you put it someplace there. Was it just rolled into the funds?
Yes, it is rolled in. And it's my understanding, Cindy, which line is it under?
It's under use of money and property.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Okay, great. So I'm going to go fast. So we'll keep the answer short. I'll make the question short and the answer short. Are the use fees that we're talking, the user fees that we charge, are those based on us using contractors to fulfill that? Like when we end up, using contractors to do a bunch of our stuff, like a building inspector gets a contractor.
Your favorite answer, it depends.
Yeah.
It could be
okay.
a mixture of staff and consultant fees. So basically, what are the costs to get X done? It could be 3 hours of a consultant time, 2 hours of Romeo's time, 30% of, 20 minutes of a development text time and overhead, and you roll that into a fee, basically. So it depends on what the charge is for that service. And that's where you have that comprehensive review that basically say, you want to approve X, tell me all the people that are involved to get that deliverable. if you
Yeah, I
will.
guess the question I was asking is, are our current fees that we're charging, are they sort of based on contractor rates or internal rates? Do you know?
Based on both, depending on what it is.
Well, except we just, like if I get a building permit, that's like, I'm given like, it's $1,000 or
Right.
whatever. Somehow somebody's already decided ahead of time how that's going to get funded.
Right, and that's based on the last user fee of 3 hours of a staff person's time, 2.5 hours of a consultant's time, half an hour of Catherine's time, all that gets rolled into that $1,000 fee.
Okay, I'm not sure. It's a fixed fee, so I'm not sure how it gets rolled in. It's not being billed per hour. It's you
It's a
basically,
fixed fee of $1,000 based on 2 or 3 different people's time.
which we
It's
figured
an
out-
average, it's an average of, we typically take 6 hours to process a permit. We charge 6 hours of different people's time for it.
right, that we figured out 10 years ago. I mean, that's what I'm trying to ask. is-
Correct. We figured
So
out 10 years ago, but we added CPI along the way.
Right, but 10 years ago, we didn't use as many contractors as we do now.
Correct?
Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so there will be a $200 fee, council member. That might be $1,000 now.
Yeah.
And we'd have to talk about it as a town.
Okay, and that's fine. I just wanted to, so likely these are going to go up and potentially significantly if we continue to use contractors.
Correct.
On the salary piece, I was a little confused and when we're talking about the sort of the amount of deficit, it seems like the fiscal 24 salaries aren't based on 20 FTEs. So that means there's going to be even more salary expense in fiscal 25, 24, 25.
You're talking about the actuals that were presented, Councilmember?
Well, I'm talking about the budget. I mean, was the budget, the budgeted number didn't look that much different than the actuals and we're only at 12. And if we're going to go to 20, like, we're at 2.2 and it was 2.5.
I see where you're going.
Yeah.
Very good question. So at some point, that might have been 15 employees. At our low was 12, not for very many months. There's also payouts of employees' time, whether it be vacation time or other
Right.
pieces. And so all of those, you're gonna net out. So it's not as, the savings is not as huge as you would think, to your point. If you're down 5 staff, you should be down $500,000, $700,000. But that's not the case.
Right. And I was flipping it the
And-
other way, which means it seems to me that our real employee expenses are more than 2.5. And when we get to our 20 FTE, that's really, when we're looking at our budget in this larger context of what are we going to do about a structural deficit?
Right.
We really should be looking at a 20 FTE employee expense rather
Correct.
than a 12 or whatever we.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely right.
All right. Are there other mandates that we think are going to get imposed on us in the next few years? I mean, obviously we can't know what we don't know, but the question is, what are the ones that we do know? We know the safety elements coming up. Are there others like that we can basically at least put a placeholder in for expenses?
I can't think of any that are that significant right off the top of my head, but there always are, as you mentioned, Councilmember. There are also a lot of GASBs, which are the financial mandates that come down from GFOA,
Right.
and those are unspoken for, and we always have to calculate for that. And that's why, as a town, you constantly have those changes and mandates moving forward. That's why this is not a 5 volunteer town anymore or a
Sure.
10 volunteer
Yeah,
town,
yeah, no, I
because of
appreciate
all those
that.
mandates.
So I
for
guess
sure.
I'm wondering where do we put that fudge factor in, if you will?
Right.
And again, I'm not looking for perfect answers tonight. That's the stuff I'd like to see.
Yeah.
Let's see, restricted funds. I was confused by your slides, but we can talk about it later. There, it showed the open space and the in lieu of fund like this year, and then like the next year's, it dropped by like $7 million. So I didn't understand what happened there. Is it just an account, the way you account for it is, it doesn't roll into the next fiscal years until you get there or something?
I don't have a magic answer to give you now. I can certainly share that and make it
I
clear.
think
I
the-
purposely did take that slide from the budget, so it's the same budget slide. So we're talking apples to apples, but
Craig, I think the second column was annual revenue. So I think the first column was
Okay,
a total
got it.
ballot, and the second
Thank you.
column was
Okay,
just.
that could
the
explain
annual.
it. Okay, I could have missed that. The next one is UUT. My understanding is we have some flexibility on where we set the UUT, and there's the voters approved it, and then the council gets to slide it within some, and it's not just whether it goes to open space or not. We also get to slide the amount we collect.
That's absolutely right.
Okay.
And that's what's on the table, is basically looking at that slide and also where it goes,
Okay.
for sure.
Okay, because I thought we could still had a little room to slide it up by itself. Then the other, so now just getting into a couple of quick last comments. I would recommend posting the property tax study, like make it separate. Like I would absolutely recommend everybody who's interested in this, you should watch the last financial committee video. It's really informative. But I would also say we should pull that out. Just make sure that it's not bundled into, you have to go down 3 deep to find it.
Have it highlighted. for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, exactly, because I think it's of interest to people. And then my last 2 comments are in terms of looking for ways to get additional revenue. I'd like to see us add some kind of line item about looking at reducing or eliminating large expenses. I don't know what they are. The sheriff's contract could be one of them. We could have less services if that's what we chose. And if we're really going to say, this is all our possibilities, I think we should be saying, what could we do to cut expenses, not just look for ways to get more revenue.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely. It's not
didn't-
just the revenue. generation,
Exactly.
it's
So I just like to
expenses as
see
well.
that as one of the bullet items of, that's, and then the last one is I think this windfall profit thing should be on the list. I don't know how to implement it, and we may not be able to implement it, but I think having it on the list so we could have a discussion about it is important.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may, we are about to reach our 7 o'clock. It is under your discretion as council and as mayor, you can continue this tonight and continue the conversation. Basically, open up the 7 o'clock meeting, continue it again and finish our questions. And you can have as short or as long of a discussion as you want. And we built that in. It's actually an item on the regular agenda. And also give an opportunity if someone wants to take a break or do other pieces as well. Okay.
If you wanted to just start the 7 o'clock meeting a little bit late, that would be okay. I'm not
Well,
sure how much more
I
time you
definitely
want.
feel like, I mean, I certainly want Judith and myself to have an opportunity to ask questions and a little bit more time for dialogue if people want to have that too. This is our primary topic right now. So however we do that, I don't have a strong opinion on. So do you have a recommendation?
I'd suggest
Whatever's the simplest.
I'd suggest we delay the regular meeting and just continue. And I think that's the most efficient way to move this on.
For the ease of folks on Zoom and in
That's
the
it.
room, we did create the one meeting. And so
Right.
basically you just take a timeout, we take a break and come back. Folks on Zoom would be on the same link. There's no changeover. So That'd
Okay,
be probably easiest for everyone involved is to basically, you could call up a break if you wanted a break or just continue.
Yeah.
So.
Are you guys feeling like you'd like a break or you want to keep going?
No, the only concern I have is if people wanted to make an oral comment at the regular meeting, they're now not sure when.
Well, I'll make yeah, no, I think we should set a time. And so first things first, looking around, would you guys like to have a break or do you want to just continue?
Continue.
And when we start
you
the
go.
next one?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to continue this discussion. And to Judith's point, we will be having oral communications for the regular agenda when we start that meeting after we finish this discussion. So.
And I will speak off topic and say, because this is a study session and I'm allowed to, I would like to thank Sue Crane and others for attending today and coming from the Sequoias. I really appreciate them in attendance.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jenny,
Thank you,
Sue,
Jenny
and
and
everybody
Sue.
else from
Thank
the, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Judith, questions?
Yeah, several of mine were already answered, but what I need a little more context around are the differences, and I think I have this from the discussion between user fees and impact fees. And then the process by which you would implement some adjustment in it. So for example, I know that we need a nexus study for the impact fee. Give me a timeline or some general sense of logistics on that. And for the user fees, is it appropriate to use a 10-year-old, average, or would we have to refresh? What would you recommend if you know today? And what is the process if we have to do more than just add CPI? what's that timeline and process like?
We can get some of those answers for you as we move forward, but obviously the two pieces are, there's a user fee study and then a nexus fee study.
Mhm.
And so the user fee study is the easier of the two. You hire a consultant to come in, they sit down with staff and the consultants and they look at all your costs and that $1,000 permit fee and what's entailed. And then they're going to give you the true costs so you can recover those. Then it's up to council discretion of whether you want to, use that new fee to your cost recovery, or you want to subsidize it to some degree or charge a certain amount. So for the sake of argument, the $1,000 fee, if it becomes $1,400, council could say, we're going to implement that. We want to recover all our costs and move forward. Or council might say, we want to have a $1,200 fee next year and we'll ramp it up to $1,400 in 2 years. We'll smooth it. There are other fees for Parks and Rec, for example, to sign up for a class. If it's $50 and all of a sudden the cost is $200, council might say, no, we want to keep that at $50. We're going to eat that cost or subsidize that cost. So that's the easier of the two, is the user fee. Still obviously staff intensive, labor intensive to get there.
A quick question on that before you move on to the harder one. If we wanted to subsidize, for example, to encourage affordable housing, that's the point at which we would have that discussion.
Correct.
For-
And you could have
it-
different fees. You could have a $1,000 fee for X and
Yeah,
a $700 fee for a different reason. And you could subsidize that. And that's at town discretion.
okay,
So obviously you just can't charge over your 100%
right,
fee.
okay,
So
okay.
you can always charge below. And there's always, in almost any town or any city, you subsidize, or the council chooses to subsidize what fee they want
Okay.
moving forward. So you don't always have to recover 100% of your costs.
Okay.
Then the larger one of the two, which I'm less familiar with, but is much more complicated, is that nexus study. That's more labor intensive, it's expensive, it takes time. That's also where the juice is worth the squeeze, if you will, because that is a huge opportunity for revenue enhancement.
Yeah.
Is getting that nexus study done, completed, and then capturing your costs moving forward.
I've heard it's like a long process,
Mhm.
like a year, and then hiring experts to help you get the
Right,
reference points that you
right.
need. Is
And
that?
that's kind of the first step, is exploring, how much would that cost? What's the time commitment moving forward? And then bringing that, whether it's to finance committee or to council, to really evaluate that.
Yeah.
Um,
And my last question is, how do I think about that? Because I would have thought if there's a windfall, as people have been referencing that is related to a potential impact on the town, in that it's impacting our infrastructure and future costs. Is that a piece of that puzzle? And I'll leave it with you. You don't have to
Yeah.
comment now, but
Yeah, definitely worth looking into for sure. I'm answering those questions.
Thank you. Let's see. Firstly, for the VLF, what bucket does that fall in when you had your revenue?
The vehicle license fee is part of property tax
Oh, it's
revenue.
part,
a
it's part of
portion
that
your
bucket?
property
It's
tax
in,
revenue.
okay. And then regarding the parcel tax, so if we, as a possible option, if we have that on the ballot in 2025, my understanding is the revenue does not come in until significantly later. So if we have it on the ballot in 2025, when would we actually see the revenue?
There's a lag for sure. There's at least a year lag. I would say between a year and a half before the revenue actually kicks in. So you would have to build that into your budget, build that into your assumptions, into your reserve, be able to cover that gap, if you will, moving
Mhm.
forward.
And you mentioned opportunities for volunteers to get involved, working groups and whatnot. My understanding is when we do a parcel tax, that can't be run by staff or by council. It needs to be run just like when a school district does it. It would need to be driven entirely by community members.
Correct.
Okay, so that's a huge volunteer opportunity for anyone who's listening if we end up going that route. You also mentioned, I think you said 21 cities have a parcel tax. Is that in what area on the?
Not 21 cities have a parcel tax, Mayor. 21 cities have some sort of revenue enhancement measure or ballot on a vote, on a ballot, if you will.
Okay, 21 within
in
like
the
the.
Bay
Pen-
Area. So
in-
within 21 Bay Area cities, at least, it's now more, I'm sure, have had some sort of revenue enhancement measure that they proposed to the voters to increase their revenue. A lot
Okay,
of them is a 1/4 sales tax, as an example, which wouldn't do us,
right, nothing.
very little,
Yeah.
obviously. But whether it be a TOT increase or a sales tax increase or a parcel tax or some sort of revenue measure. So this is not abnormal in any means at all for a town to be able to
Yeah.
ask for funds from the city. from the
Okay.
town.
Are there any things on the list that we could do like right away? So one is kind of a follow-up to what Judith was saying, is the UUT and what Craig, because when Jeremy was here, there was discussion that there's a band there and we're in the middle of the band, not at the top end.
Yeah.
So, and my understanding is, if I'm recalling correctly, that was just a vote from the council because it was approved within that band. Am I remembering that right, Jeff?
Are you talking about the UUT?
Yes.
I actually had the same question. The UUT is authorized, the general portion is authorized at 5.5%, and in the past, we have voted to reduce it to 4.5. I was wondering, is it currently at 4.5 or is it at 5.5 right now?
It is currently at 5.5 now,
Oh.
effective July 1st of 2023.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
there is a portion that you can immediately do. The larger portion, which is actually increasing the tax itself that we pay, that has to go to a resident vote.
Right.
And so that would take a little bit longer. And so it's like it's a two-pronged approach. So you could do user fee relatively quickly, call it 6 months or less. You could also do a UUT change. For lack of a better word, it's not an increase. It's changing the allocation of the UUT relatively quickly. The other ones would take a longer time to implement, obviously.
So you had 7, and it sounds like about 2 of them maybe we could do sooner versus later. Okay, great. And then my last question is kind of the biggest question, and that is, where do we go from here? So we have, this list of 7 possible approaches. As you said, there's no silver bullet. It's probably going to take a combination. Thinking about how we're going to be making these decisions as a council, like what's your vision for that from this point forward?
Obviously, first thing would be obviously supporting the fact that we need to move forward on this, giving direction to me as town manager that this is something you would like to pursue, whether it's just nodding heads today or, whatever it is in our meetings moving forward. But I think the 2 things are obviously my commitment as town manager, and to Councilmember Taylor's point, tomorrow, and what we've done already is we're looking at all our consultant fees. We're looking at our legal fees. We need to change our expenses now and reduce those now. An example of a conscious decision to reduce expenses is hiring of Romeo Herrera, who is also our building inspector. Now we don't have to consult and hire for an outside building inspector. There's a cost there. And we've looked at that cost and what that would mean moving forward. What other staff members can we have that have certified certificates or licenses that we now don't have to consult out for? So there's things that we can do tomorrow, for lack of a better term, to be able to do that. Also, as we bring to you our budget in June and bring it in September, is reducing those costs for consultants or legal fees or staffing as we move forward. And so really looking at all those different pieces. I started with staffing. We're looking at consultant fees, and then now we're going to be looking at legal fees moving forward. The next piece, where do we go from here, Mayor? I would envision that we would have a finance committee meeting. We talked about whether we would want to have a finance committee before or after this meeting. In discussion with George and some of the members, George's suggestion we have it after. And so basically, I think we would ask finance committee, okay, you've seen the menu, if you will. What's the low hanging fruit, or what do you want to tackle first? And have finance committee kind of direct that piece. While at the same time, you're directing me to come up with the budget, reduce the expenses, and probably user fee study as an example. I don't see any reason why I as town manager can't move forward user fee study with staff, because you've already approved that. So there's certain things that we can certainly, for lack of a better term, start tomorrow. We can start in the next month with finance committee, and then also my hope is to then bring back in September, the September revision, some of those costs, and to say, finance committee thinks they want to start with these 3 things. These 3 things are going to cost $100,000 over a year's time. Is this something you want to pursue? And then we can kind of pursue those. So I see that as kind of the natural order of things.
Okay, so to use your expression, which I like, is the juice worth a squeeze. On things like evaluating charter town, parcel talks, annexing, on and on, those are the bigger ones. Understanding that is going to, you have to spend money again, as you said, in order to get those answers. So is your thinking that the process would be have the finance committee vet those, prioritize them, then you would come back to us in the fall, it sounds like, to decide which items we are going to invest in terms of exploring? Because obviously just exploring is going to be a cost.
That's what I envision.
Okay, that's helpful.
And the only thing I would add to that is we're planning to have a meeting in about 1 month's time. So before Memorial Day to kick this off. And we have some openings on the finance committee, and we'll try to fill those before that time as well.
Awesome.
And the benefit to Mayor of us being a town, obviously, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's many people who have done this before us, whether it be a parcel tax or a UUT increase or a TOT or a new whatever. So a lot of the time spent in the next couple of months will just be on research. We actually have city manager surveys where city managers survey each other and ask, what have you done in the last 2 years for a ballot measure? What have you, so we can pull all that information. You can pull online all the towns that were successful in their ballots, successful in their increases. And so a lot of it is fact gathering and research as opposed to us reinventing the wheel, if we will. And we can actually say, well, 15 towns tried this and the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. So let's not do it, right? And so there's a lot of benefit of us being government, obviously, and we can share those resources.
Great. George, I'm realizing we didn't give you an opportunity to ask questions. Do you have any questions you wanted to ask? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
thank you. No, I
Okay.
had a crack at
Yes.
Sharif earlier.
Okay, good,
Thank
good.
you.
All right. All right. We're just happy you are here. So we want to give you this much opportunity. Oh, Jeff.
Follow up on one thing. The UUT, are you saying that if we wanted to, I mean, just if we wanted to reallocate between the general fund and the open space fund, we could do that at a council vote, or would that have to go to a resident vote?
I believe that's by council. I'll have to check.
They'd probably
Only
want
the
to check that.
2%. Yeah, we'll have to check though.
I-
There's a piece of that that can be by council. Changing the 7.5% you can't change.
I
That
thought the
goes
total we
to-
couldn't change. I also didn't think we could
Correct.
change that borderline, that sort of
Yeah,
cutoff.
that
between
goes back to the
resident-
voters. So that goes back to the voters. Yeah. But the 5.5 versus the 4.5, that's council.
Well, we're at 5.5 now.
Yeah.
So we used to lower it, but now we've stopped. Yeah.
I think what Jeff is saying, it's not clear that we can change the 2%.
And I'm agreeing it's not
Okay.
clear. Yeah, yeah, exactly. We have to, we'll take a look at that and see.
All right. We did say that we would also do a quick oral communications at the end of the discussion. So I know it's starting to run into our regular agenda meeting, but I would love to give the opportunity. I do see one hand raised here in the schoolhouse. And just asking if you're making remarks for a second time, not to just that they be new remarks. New remarks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really a question, Sheree. So your pie chart for your budget, and the pie chart was published earlier this year. So it's a budget number from last July. So I just want to make, it's really a question. George, you were at the finance committee meeting when Paula Cohen presented, and you were as well. So you presented a number of 3.7 on the pie chart. I understood that. But when Paula gave a presentation, her estimate of our proceeds from property tax was 2.9, correct? So there's an $800,000 difference there. That's a big number. So I'm just wondering, like, did you hear the same thing that I heard, or
Yeah.
maybe George?
And very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Basically, it's the difference in presentation because one of it is the property tax itself. The other one is the property tax plus that T allocation, the TEA and the other pieces. So it's like that 4 plus 2. So the 4% is the 2.9 million. The 6% total that we get off of the dollar after these wonky calculations that Paula was trying to explain to all of us, that's the 3.7 million, if we will, or that's what we budgeted.
Yeah,
And so
one
it's
thing
a
I recommend-
presentation.
I recommend that anyone who's interested, because it's fascinating and sort of mind-blowing. The finance committee meeting from March is on YouTube. And Paula is the first speaker, and her presentation is very informative because there's like 4 or 5 different mind-numbing things that are used to adjust the total.
Yeah.
And she makes it all sound understandable while she's speaking, but I can't do it justice.
But my
here.
fundamental point here is I just want to make sure that we're not, in a trap where we've got an $800,000 deficit that we haven't realized that we have it, because she reported 2.9 and it says, 3.7. And sort of the other observation is if we're only getting 4% of our property tax proceeds and other towns and communities are getting, 11, 12, 13, is there a good explanation for that? Because if you just back into these numbers, Portola Valley is contributing $100 million to the county in property tax, and we're only getting 3.6
We
back.
did challenge that, if you will. I challenged that when I first began, that 4% or the 6%, if you will. Paula, our consultant, which I've consulted with now moving forward. So she's our consultant moving forward for the town on property tax. She also can, challenge that, if you will, and the numbers are accurate. And so what we get is what we're supposed to receive. And it's based on our infrastructure, based on our growth. So I can say, rest assured, we're getting what's owed to us.
Yeah.
It is low, and it is low compared to other towns, but we are getting what we're supposed to receive.
Yeah, I think
So-
it would be useful if people understood we're contributing $100 million to the county coffers. We're
Right.
only getting 3 back. I mean,
Yeah.
this reminds me of California's perennial complaint to Washington, that we're paying a lot more taxes to Washington than we get back.
A wealthy town does not mean wealthy property tax, unfortunately. That's the disconnect. So as wealthy as the town is on our tax assessment and our role of billions of dollars or millions of dollars, that doesn't equate to revenue for the town itself, unfortunately. So,
Thank you. Okay, we have one hand raised on Zoom. Rita Gomez.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. I still would like to know how much donation monies were collected from the different committee meetings, because that one is a whole campaign and took time out of each of those committee meetings, and I was there and I heard it. But I just want to mention something about, the possibility of us putting in for parcel tax. Yeah, there's about 1,700 homes in town, but many have exceptions and don't pay parcel tax. But of course, everyone in our town has the right to vote to pass parcel tax. So, I think you should possibly, we as a community need to test the waters if the residents can are and willing to do another parcel tax. And there's got to be other ways, impact fees, and also land lease on some of this land that we own that we're proposing building happens, and if we have a question, we can ask Stanford. They know how to lease their land that people build on all the time, and they'd probably happily consult with us. Thank you.
And go ahead, Mayor.
Go ahead. Thank you, Rita. Yes, Sharif.
So Mayor, based on all of these ballot measures and things that may go to a ballot, obviously there'd be polling involved. We would get the temperature of the town, official, call it Gallup poll, or I forget what the right word is, but we'll get official polling. That's a major step moving forward. Is we wouldn't just bring something forward to that. I do want to thank the mayor. I want to thank council for this study session. A little bit messy, a little bit bumpy. I understand that, but at the same time, really wanted to have the opportunity to take a time out, have a focused conversation. This is one of 100 conversations we'll have in the next 3 years in different formats, in different ways. And really, I think it's a lot of information to take in on one night. Some of us have seen this 3-4 times. Some of us, this is new to us. And so basically give us time as a community to digest it, talk about it, and then we'll come back, obviously, in future meetings. You'll direct me as town manager where to go, but really wanted to get that information out there. It's fresh on our minds, and then get direction moving forward. And I wanted to thank George for being so flexible, sitting with us literally on here. I had a meeting with him earlier today, and he's really been in lockstep with me and a major supporter for us, along with Finance Committee. And we have a lot to do with Finance Commission and a lot to do with our new finance director. So I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to bring this out here.
Thank you. I did notice we did before, right as you started, we had another hand raised. So I'm just going to take one final public comment, and then we're going to close public comment so we can move on to the regular agenda meeting. So Carolyn Bertongen.
Thank you very much. Actually, I will pass. I think Sharif had a very good comment. This is, what the previous Greg and Rita summarized, and definitely George. This is a journey. So let's keep it at this and move on with your regular agenda, but we're not done yet. And I think the word disconnect is an important word. We should all remember this. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Okay, I am going to close the study session, and we will all take a 5-minute break. It is 7:18, so let's get back together at 7:23. Yeah. All right, 7:25. Calling the meeting back to order for the regular session. Sharif, you just had an exhaustive town manager report. Do you have an additional town manager report?
I do.
Wow.
But
Okay.
I will be quick.
All right.
If that was a hint for me not to say anything.
No, I just
didn't
didn't
get it, but.
I mean, you're working
The love
overtime.
of God, please, no.
Yeah, right. Real quickly, just because this is the regular session, we wanted to re-welcome Romeo Herrera, our new building and planning director, who's in the schoolhouse today. I'm looking forward to working with him. He's also setting up meetings with council and members of the community, and I do believe he wanted to say a quick word.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Town Attorney, Town Manager. My name is Romeo Herrera. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to working with everyone. I have received a few calls and emails already, so I'm starting to create a list. And I've also sent out an email looking forward to speaking with everyone one-on-one. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Welcome. We're just happy to have you. And I think I probably speak on behalf of all of us that we're looking forward to our one-on-one meetings and getting started. So
Thank you very much.
thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. Also, just wanted to publicly acknowledge we have our Volunteer of the Year, and we celebrated our party on Friday, and we had a great turnout, and we wanted to congratulate Patty Dews in public in our council meeting for all of her work, and she was selected as Volunteer of the Year for 2024. And there was a list of things that you mentioned, Mayor, at the meeting, all the committees that she's served on, most notably Parks and Rec, and along with her Town's Historic Resource Committee and all the other pieces she's done. And Patty's just a great asset to the town. We love working with her. She's a very positive person, brings a lot of energy, and we look forward to working with her more and more. And her reward was not only being acknowledged at the party, but then she gets to revamp the entire committee handbook.
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
It's the first thing, but congratulations to Patty Dews, and want to thank her for all of her work publicly. And then also, there's one piece I wanted to mention about Patty. I didn't get a chance to stay in here, but just thank you to Patty for that moving forward. The last piece is I do want to publicly mention John Biggs. John Biggs is basically wound down his last hours with Romeo. He set some time aside to sit down with Romeo, gave him a list of things of, passing along the torch, if you will. But we really just want to acknowledge John Biggs for all of his hard work and all that he's done in the last 6 months or so. Really an asset to the town. His expertise has been tremendous, and we're going to miss him as a leader, as a person. And at the end of the day, John's just a good man, and we're just going to miss him. And I will razz him, and you can all give him a hard time. He is one of the only, or if not the only, planning and building director to have a housing element certified, but then decertified. So feel free to poke him when you see him. But I wanted to state that in public. But thank you, John Biggs, for all that you've done. His legacy will be well felt, and Romeo had a chance to meet and sit down with him, but just wanted to thank him publicly.
So could we do a proclamation and include that in the proclamation?
We could,
Yeah, I'd like to do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
That'd be a fun
I've
one to
already given
read.
him a hard time. We have to have some levity sometimes. when it comes to these
Absolutely,
things.
absolutely. And adding to that, I can see that Patty Dews is on Zoom. And so Patty, I hope you are blushing as we are singing your praises and likely rolling your eyes as we're assigning you new tasks when you're not in the room. So, but all around agreed. We're also glad that you were recognized as Volunteer of the Year last week at the party, which was a great turnout and a great event, by the way. So thank you also to Carrie Chin for that event. And thank you to John Biggs if you're listening, although you're probably not.
He's run out of hours. He's not listening.
Yeah, he's not spending his limited time on that. Okay, thank you, Sharif.
One last thing, and
Okay.
I didn't mention in this message is that we have submitted a contingent offer for our finance director. So we're looking forward to complementing our exec team with a finance director soon, based on that. So that concludes my town manager message.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharif. All right, we will move on to oral communications. I don't see any hand. Oh, we do have one hand raised in the schoolhouse. Tim Clark.
Thank you, council members, for having me. I'm here from Ladera Community Church. I live at 140 Lucero in Portola Valley. And I'm here to talk about the housing element and the zoning, which is not on the agenda tonight. What I'm saying is included in a letter that was in the council packet this time. But I wanted to summarize it for people who may be online and don't read the packet. It may take me more than my 3 minutes, I regret to say, so do you tell me when I need to stop? 3 or 4 years, we've been working on an affordable housing project on a lot that's adjacent to the church for close to 5 years now. 3 to 4 years ago, we asked to be included in the affiliated housing program that the town has, and we were approved for that. That was at the time the only route for building multifamily housing in Portola Valley. So I want to tell you what we're thinking about there first, and both the mayor and the vice mayor have been out recently. We walked the site. It's only half an acre and you can do it in either 10 or 40 minutes, depending on how much you want to talk at the same time. It's land that stands fallow. Basically, it's a meadow. There is also the church itself, as well as what you see under construction, an ADU that is on the church property. Is not in Portola Valley, it is in San Mateo County. And it has created a lot of confusion because that's what people see when they go down Alpine Road. We're moving in June to get to a vote to authorize negotiations with Habitat for Humanity to build 6 units of affordable housing on that site. For sites of that size, for projects of our size, Habitat is currently using modular housing, things that are built off-site and then brought on. We have discussed this with both the Planning Commission and the ASCC, and I suspect we'll have continuing conversations with them. We're also trying to save 3 big heritage oaks on the site, so we're not going to use the whole thing. And that reduces what we can do with the site. I'll skip the part about why we're doing this. I think you can imagine why a church might do this. We need some timely assistance from the town of Portola Valley on several issues that are impeding our proposed project. The first is the zoning. We have been given MF 20 to 23 zoning, which gives us a minimum of 10 units on that site. We can't build fewer. There's the only other zoning in the town for multifamily, it would allow us to build 2. Well, we want to build between 2 and 10, and that's not allowed. That needs to be fixed. And we're asking for your help with that. We had earlier told the town that we would build up to 10 units, but that up to 10 became a minimum of 10 in the process somehow. The second piece is that we don't have legal clarity on whether we can build housing on that lot. In October, we got a letter from something called the Westridge Architectural Supervisors Committee, which is often known as WASC, to inform us that there was a deed restriction that would keep us from building multifamily housing. But the letter did not seem to address other elements of recent California law that has been passed in the last 3 or 4 years. I actually had a conversation with George here between the meetings, George Savage, who is a member of the WASC organization, and I'm sure we'll be talking in the future. But we believe the town can help us with this problem and intervene by either in negotiating or by facilitating the conversation. And on the third point, the problem we have is with the zoning code itself. I don't know if you looked at the code. It's about 59 pages. The part that applies to our lot is 10 pages of brand new type, brand new copy. It appears that it was taken from, it was designed for a project in Mountain View or Redwood City, where you'd be building a multifamily complex of multiple buildings, 3 stories at least. And those are being applied to our project, which is 6 single story units in a rural setting. There are a bunch of other things about those that are not quite right, but I think the Planning Commission will be trying to work those out. They're unable to give us the zoning we want right now because it said our site is designated in the housing element for at least 10 units. And that creates a problem with making a change, especially under the circumstances you have right now. So we're asking for 3 things. First is a way to build about 6 units instead of what we're zoned. We also would have asked you, as I've mentioned, to help communicate and perhaps negotiate with WASC about the ability to develop on that site. George was just saying that they're very happy to talk. So we'll be moving in that direction, I'm sure. And the third point that we're asking for is to clarify what is happening with the town's affordable housing fund. We're aware that there was approved, something called a framework was approved. What Vice Mayor calls a framework was approved back in December. It's not actionable. It's not clear how you apply to get that money. And I think we need some clarity that if the town is trying to encourage affordable housing in the town, as you have promised, I think we need to address that. My conclusion is, and I'm going to read this because it's in the letter and I want to make sure it's clear. In order to keep our parcel in the town's housing element inventory, our church council is asking that you, the town, provide us a written response by June 15th of 2024 on your intentions for addressing our concerns and for resolutions of those three issues. I don't believe I'm allowed to take questions, but if under this format, but if anybody has questions, please approach me. If anybody else wants a tour of the site, we're happy to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Any other hands raised in the schoolhouse? Please join us.
Hi, my name is Liv. I am an eighth grader at Woodland School. And I am here as part of my action piece in a service project concerning the evacuation routes for my neighborhood, which is Ladera. When I started my research with online documents and conversations with Rodney Reed, the deputy sheriff, and Ms. Kim Giuliacci, who is the fire marshal at Woodside Fire District. Fire risk overall in Portola Valley has been rising due to climate change and increased human activity in fire-prone zones. Not to mention we sit almost directly on top of the San Andreas Fault, which makes our risks even higher. I'm talking about Ladera because Ladera might not be officially part of Portola Valley, but Portola Valley is still responsible for its safety, and I feel like it's kind of forgotten sometimes. The only evacuation route we have in Ladera, besides the main entrances at La Cuesta and La Mesa, is a small road on Moro Vista. It is extremely narrow to the point where if you're in your car, you can't even turn around. It's very fire prone in itself. It's covered in foliage and trees. This is a huge issue because there are lots of examples of what can go wrong when there aren't adequate escape routes, including the fires in Maui, which is a rather extreme example, but it's a good one, I feel. What happened was they didn't have adequate escape routes. They didn't have tests or drills. And when it came to it, even if someone could escape their neighborhood, they still got caught in the fires in their cars. Concerning Woodland, which is my school in Ladera, many parents and teachers and students don't even know about the safety measures we do have, as do actually many of the 1,600 residents in the 422 houses. They don't know either. My family personally, we didn't actually know about any of the evacuation routes until we've been living here for 5 years. And we had to find out on our own. Some mentions from a friend. Suggestions to make Moro Vista safer is to maybe trim back the foliage, make it less fire prone, maybe add another separate escape route through Webb Ranch or through some of the fields around it. And in Woodland, it's most likely that if a fire or disaster were to happen, many of the students would have to evacuate on foot. If there was an immediate evacuation order, there might be too much traffic, and parents coming to pick up their kids probably might not be an option. Some possible meetup points might be the Ladera Shopper, or if that's not an option at all, if they have to evacuate the neighborhood altogether, possibly the Webb Ranch Pumpkin Patch, Sharon Park Safeway, or Slack, if that's an option to meet up with parents.
Liv, I'm just going to make a comment. Because this is your first meeting, you probably don't realize that we have 3 minutes for public comment. And so I want to give you the opportunity to wrap up.
Yeah,
So
that's all. Thank you.
perfect. All right. Thank you so much. Excellent. No other hands raised in the schoolhouse. I'll move it over to Zoom. First up is Carolyn Vertonghen. Carolyn? Oh. Carolyn?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Great,
We can
thank
hear
you.
you.
And I
Go
hope
ahead.
Liz, I hope Liz can hear us. Liz, I applaud you for coming forward, because this is an issue we have addressed over more than 10 years. And so it is important. And the issues that you raised are very important because Portola Valley has to go through Ladera or has to go through Woodside in order to escape. So, and we have other issues. We have no internet or reliable internet. We have no landlines. Many owners had to give up their landlines, all because town management did not help us improve infrastructure. So there's many issues, and I hope you will continue your advocacy because it's so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next up is Rita Comas.
Hi, I just want to thank you for the previous meeting and moving things forward. And to the young lady living in Ladera, I always say if one person does something in the pool, we all have to get out of the pool. And I applaud you for stepping up and hope you get an A on your report.
Thank you, Rita. I don't see any additional hands raised on Zoom, so I am going to close oral communications. And we will move up. Is there one new one? Oh, we do have one new one that just came up. Dave Strom. Dave, are you there? I think you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm sorry. Is that better?
That's great. Thank
Okay.
you. 3 minutes.
I'm Dave Strom. I am one of the co-chairs of the Westridge Committee, and we've been engaged in trying to engage with the Ladera Community Church for the better part of 4 or 5 months now. We've sent over a couple of correspondences to the Committee of Elders, tried to follow up and get a discussion going. And there are really a couple of points that I wanted to address here. One, in terms of the presentation that was made to the Planning Commission, there were what I would say are unfortunate references in there about the history of Westridge, alleging that we are somehow an organization with racist covenants or provisions. You know, the fact is that when Westridge was first formed in 1947, there were racially prohibitive conditions upon who could buy a home there. It turns out that for those of you who were around back then, and I was not back then, but a year later, at the time, one could not undertake any development like Westridge and secure bank financing or insurance for such a development unless one had such restrictions. And so the founders complied in order to get the community going. The way Westridge was structured was that the CC&Rs around which the community was established and which we are responsible for today were next due for revision 20 years after the community was founded. And in 1967, in the heart of what I was getting out of high school and college, remember to be an extraordinarily turbulent time in the United States. The leadership of Westridge, Bill Lane included, got mobilized and decided that they were going to change that restrictive provision, which could only be changed by a majority of the residents with the agreement of the founder, the original grantor of the deed of Westridge. And 92% of the residents agreed to remove that restriction, and it was gone in the 1967 revision. You know, I think it's unfortunate when people throw around these suppositions or alleged facts about another organization without understanding what that organization is or what the people's values are all about. So I just frankly wanted to clarify that for the public record and for the understanding of the church members and elders with whom we haven't been able to get communication going. And the second bit of communication is frankly using this opportunity to say to the church, we're here to try to help you solve this problem. We would be delighted to do what we could to facilitate your project being able to move forward. There was a modification of your deed made 20 years
Dave?
ago. Yes.
I just have to remind you of the time.
Okay.
We're over the 3 minutes.
Let me just say that we are ready to discuss and do what we can to assist in making this project possible as far as Westridge is concerned.
Thank you.
And we encourage the church to reach out to us.
Thank you, Dave. All right, I don't see any additional hands raised in the schoolhouse or on Zoom, so I am going to close oral communications and we will move on to the consent agenda. Looking around to my colleagues, does anybody want to pull any item from the consent agenda? I'm seeing shaking heads. Mary, how about you? Nope. Judith, no. Okay, motion to approve. Is
So move.
there a second? Roll call?
Councilmember Alps,
Aye.
Councilmember Hufty,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Haskell,
Aye.
Mayor Warnikoff,
Aye.
motion passes.
Thank you. We will now move on to item number 8, the regular agenda. First item 8A is the town council priorities, and I believe we are going to have Corey Stoker do this presentation.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Council, and Community. I'm here to talk about the Town Council priorities. And back on March 18th, we met at the Sequoias to have a priority setting workshop with the Town Council hosted by Baker Tilly, and generously the Sequoias allowing us to use their conference room. The Town Council came together and decided on 5 priorities. They are in no particular order. Just wanting to note, they are fiscal responsibility and long-term viability, safety, responsible land use, organizational efficiency and effectiveness, and environmental sustainability. So each of these priorities is a goal, and underneath these goals, we do have items that were discussed that were the strategies surrounding the way we would get to each priority. So to add some color, if I may, to each of the priorities is fiscal responsibility and long-term viability would be preparing a staff plan for the finance department, which includes hiring a finance director, articulating a plan for finances and financial management structure to the town, similar to what the town manager did today, provide presentations that discuss the financial stages of the town. Safety, which is items that relate to emergency preparedness, examining the role of the volunteer police commissioner, enhancing community understanding of crime statistics, and improved communication surrounding safety. Responsible land use, which is implementation of the housing element post-adoption plan, developing guidelines for the opt-in program, implementation of the ADU/JADU support program. Organizational efficiency and effectiveness. Some of the strategies discussed were filling vacancies, such as establishing customer service metrics, updating the committee and commission handbook. And environmental sustainability, developing the climate action plan or furthering the development, as some work was already done, implementing REACH codes and advocating for sustainability efforts at the state level. So with those strategies and the priorities that we have, the staff plans to come forward with a work plan on how we want to reach each of those goals and ensure that the projects we have are aimed towards each of those priorities. The reason for the priorities is to aim the council's work and ensure that we are working all in the same direction. And the other promise staff has is to provide reporting to town council. whether that be quarterly reporting in a similar format that was done previously, or if there's something more effective that the town council prefers, to discuss what is being done for each of these priorities. All the staff is requesting tonight would be that the town council accept the 5 priorities that were previously discussed and that we will return with a work plan at a future meeting.
Yeah, and if I may, I just want to make one comment to augment what you said within safety. That discussion also included the safety element and the evacuation plan and topics related to wildfire risk.
Yes.
Yeah.
The strategies I discussed, I apologize, were not fully informed. It was just partial of what we
Right.
discussed that day. But yes,
Yep.
we will be fleshing that out even further.
Awesome. Thank you. We had a great, robust discussion that day. So my guess is you guys don't have questions, but, any questions on the priorities?
Oh, maybe I'll have one on the environmental sustainability one. I don't really hear you talking about the contribution of our lands to our environmental sustainability, like wetland management and open space management. I thought we did discuss that. And I think what we really have to offer that's unique to us, since we have no money, we can really don't have any power, is the management of our own lands. So I'd like to see that emphasized under that environmental sustainability, because we're having trouble maintaining and restoring our own public lands.
Absolutely. I do think there were pieces under responsible land use, but we can ensure that it touches over in environmental sustainability.
Thank you.
I just have a question on process, because we did flesh out a number of these, and you've mentioned, I think, some, but not all. The next step is you flesh out, will the public have a chance to see the subcategories?
Yes.
Okay, so today is just the overarching.
Yeah, today
Principles.
was the
Okay.
closing of the loop. As out of the retreat, we didn't have an actionable
Right.
item from that. So this is more accepting them. And I agree, yes, we'll have the work plan that will cover not only the 5, but have sort of the items underneath it that we discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Terrific. Doesn't look like there's any additional questions. I will take public comment on this agenda item. I don't see any hands raised in the schoolhouse. One hand raised on Zoom. Christy Corley.
Yeah, I was just wondering, when I look at the word environmental sustainability, are we a priority conservation town? And what does that mean? And can you please define that? And, with a lot of the building going on, there was a deer stuck in the construction zone the other day, and I had to, with a foreman, get out in the middle of Alpine Road and stop a cement truck so the deer could run from the inside the site to go across the street back up onto the Hawthorns Hill. So how can we, with our building going on, let contractors and foremen know that, that wildlife is a priority and we help them get back out to their nature? I guess that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. I don't see any additional hands raised on Zoom, so I will close oral communications and bring it back to council for discussion. If there is any discussion at this point. If not, my understanding is we are accepting this list. Do we need to take a vote to accept that list, or?
Yes, I would.
Okay, all right. Would somebody like to make a motion to accept this list of priorities?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Councilmember Elves,
Aye.
Councilmember Hupkey,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Haskell,
Aye.
Mayor Warnikoff,
Aye.
motion passes.
And I would just add, I am looking forward to the next level down. That was actually what I was hoping to see. So I do look forward to that.
All right, moving on to item 8B regarding future council agenda items. Catherine.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and Community. This item also is a follow-on to the council retreat. I would say falling into the category of organizational efficiency. One item that came up in discussion at the retreat, and actually has come up in discussion prior to that time, is okay, so most of the items that the council discusses on your agenda follow from the council priorities or our standing items like the budget or our annual reporting to the to the housing community development on our housing production, financial reporting, that kind of thing. What about items that come up mid-year after you've already adopted priorities? What is the process for council members to request that new items get placed on future council agendas? And this is a question that was posed to me when I joined the town and to Sharif. And frankly, we didn't know the answer because there wasn't a policy written down. And I've worked in other cities that do have a procedure in their council rules of procedure. So it was something that I suggest, why don't you talk about this at the council retreat? And we could do some more research, or you could clarify what the current procedure is. And so the discussion at that retreat was, my takeaway was, well, we do have sort of a practice. It hasn't been written down, but it seems to work pretty well. So there was a general sense that it would be helpful to clarify it, provide some transparency to the public and some certainty for staff in terms of how these requests are made. So that's sort of the background on this item. The draft resolution and policy basically documents what existing practice is to the best of staff's understanding. And granted, we are, both generally new. So, but generally speaking, it's the council members have followed sort of two different paths to seek new future agenda items. One is by a request, either verbally in writing to the town manager. The town manager, on their discretion, can go ahead and place an item on a future agenda. And the second option was a little bit more involved, but it was to submit a colleagues memo. As you know, the colleagues memo, there's a sort of a standing item on every council agenda for colleagues memos. Generally, they're used for reporting on committee assignments and that sort of thing. No action is taken on colleagues memos in the current format. But this second path would be that council members may submit a colleagues memo. And then while council does not take actions on colleagues memos, if further action is requested at that time, a majority of the council members basically the council members could make a motion. Second, if there's a majority that vote in favor, then the county manager would prepare a staff report and place the item on a future council agenda for consideration and action. So that is the proposed clarification of existing practice. And I did put one extra thing in the staff or in the policy to note that this is the policy for council member placement of items on the agenda. The town manager and town attorney place items on the agenda in consideration of council adopted priorities. Or in the case of the town attorney, if there is for example, a threat of litigation, there may need to be a closed session on that. But this policy is intended for council members and clarity in terms of how those council members may place items on the agenda.
Great. Thank you very much, Catherine. Council questions? All right. Any questions?
Yes. My complaint originally was that I had done colleagues memos and that they hadn't gotten on the agenda. And geologic safety was one of those. I'm just looking for the reference. I think it was way back in January 23. And a number of, and so we had those, we had that. policy. I was told to use a college memo and I did do it. And we was put on the roll forward. And then it just sort of gradually slept off the bottom of the roll forward until then we didn't have roll forward for a while and now it's never crept back up. Would you suggest that I start again and write another colleague's memo, or how would you suggest me trying to get something on the agenda now?
It's the question of.
Yeah, within
policy.
this policy, yeah. I mean, you can always just let it slide, right? Is that sort of the way it works if, depending on who's presenting it, what the subject is, it can't, is there any requirement to have it come forward? If you do such and such, you can get it on the agenda.
Well, I guess I'll say by way of background, I think this policy was put forward sort of in response to,
Yeah,
conversations that we've had
right.
about frustrations about having items not put on council agendas. So in this situation, I mean, I guess the council's welcome to discuss whether it agrees if you go forward with this policy, but this policy would have you, I guess, resubmit this colleagues memo. And when it comes to council agenda, that at that time, the council could make a vote and vote to have it placed as a standalone item on a future agenda for action.
Okay. Yeah. I don't see that it changes anything, this motion.
If you put it on, it will be on the next council. It'll be there. We won't
Okay.
act on it, but
Okay.
it will be at the next.
All right. Thank you.
So I had two questions. They're sort of interrelated. I was surprised that bringing an issue up with the mayor, for instance, wouldn't get something on the agenda. It was like the town manager or a colleague's memo. That seemed like not what we do. Like if I want to get something on, I typically would ask the mayor or the vice mayor. And then my second sort of related question is, you make this sound like the town manager writes our agenda independent of the mayor and the vice mayor. And I thought the mayor and the vice mayor sort of look at the roll forward and work with the town manager and put together the agenda. So I was just worried that this policy seemed to imply some things that don't feel like the way we're doing business. So I was wondering if you could clarify that.
Sure, I'll do my best and I welcome the town manager to clarify as well. The town manager does review the roll forward with the mayor and the vice mayor. My understanding was that option number one was the existing practice. And so one of the benefits of having the request go to the town manager as opposed to the mayor and the vice mayor is that you avoid a Brown Act issue. Of course, if the mayor, as a practical matter, whether you ask the mayor or the town manager, they're going to have a meeting and they're going to talk about whether to put that on the agenda. So that's, I think, really the only reason that this is phrased the way it is.
I guess I wasn't worried about Brown Act. I wouldn't go to both of them. I would either go to the vice mayor or go to the mayor. I mean, that seems like what we've done in the past. So, I mean, if we informally do that and it becomes part of the discussion, I think it's fine. I'm not too worried about it. It just doesn't feel like quite what we do now.
So, can you give us background on how, what the origin of this particular one is? You said on the one hand, it's reflecting in part what current practice is, but then we have this majority requirement and a two-step process, which we haven't had. So I'm kind of curious if you can help me understand where this is coming from in that respect.
I hope I can. I mean, I haven't actually seen this in practice since I've been with the town. So it hasn't been quite a year yet. So this is just what I've been told. I think that's what we discussed at the priority setting retreat, was that these are the two ways. And so I put them down on paper. Thinking through the colleagues memo route, I realized that just having a colleagues memo isn't going to probably be sufficient. If you say you want a dog, for use this example, say you want a dog park, putting a colleagues memo in, asking for discussion on the dog park is not going to really work, because it's not going to have the input of the research in the background, et cetera. You wouldn't be able to make a decision on the dog park. So it would be, hey, we really want to have a discussion on the dog park, put in a colleagues memo. And then if the majority of the council says, yeah, this is actually something we really want to talk about, we may not have it on our list of priorities this year, but this is important and we want to add it. That would be the opportunity for the majority vote, and then it would be placed on a future agenda for discussion and action.
So let's play that out a little bit. Step one, I really want a dog park. I go to Sharif, and in his total discretion, he can take it or not, and he can get back to me in 7 months or 7 minutes. It's totally unclear what that turnaround time is. So then I decide I'm going to do a little more work, and I want a colleagues memo. So I write the colleagues memo, not proposing a specific approach to a dog park, but I think we need a dog park. I would like to have the council discuss a dog park. That's what that colleagues memo would be like, right?
Yes.
And then if 3 out of 5 don't want it, I can't bring it up again. According to this, right? At that, the public will know I'm raising the issue, but 3 people can say, nah, we don't want to talk about it. And then I can't raise it again, presumably. Is that how this
Well,
works?
this technically doesn't say you couldn't raise it again. You could maybe come back a few months later and see if folks have
Yeah.
changed their minds.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, okay. I'll save my other.
And on the staff
Comments.
level, if I may, as a town manager, the colleagues memo is awkward because what it does is it brings forward an item that you can't talk about, but you already brought up to the public, to the staff. And so we're trying to find a happy medium of how to get things on the agenda, because the colleagues memo introduces something that you either are or not going to talk about, but you already brought it out. You already.
Well, the topic is
so-
different than the thing,
Yeah.
right? To me, I can tell you what, we want to talk about a budget and we want to talk about that all the time. I'm not telling you what I want in the budget,
Right.
right? So I think the colleagues memo is just, here's a subject that I think the town council needs to consider. I have to have enough in there to kind of give a vote,
I
let
think
somebody
that's
have an
that's
opinion.
what we need to flesh out, Vice Mayor, is that piece, because sometimes the colleague memo doesn't address that. And so maybe to your point,
Yeah.
I think we're trying to get clarity on the colleagues memo.
Well, just to put this in context, the post housing adoption plan was a colleagues memo.
Yeah, well,
And we wrote it as a colleagues memo. It was not something, I mean,
that might have been a misnomer though.
we didn't go to the town, we didn't go to the
something
town
that-
manager to.
So,
put it
so
on.
let's use different terminology for this, because I view this as a proposal memo or a discussion topic memo, as opposed to the report from a subcommittee making a proposal on a granular level.
That should
That's
have
how
been
I read it.
subcommittee Update. Yours maybe should have been, sorry,
Yeah,
a subcommittee update.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably it. And, if the function is, I understand the function, and that's my last question for you to react to, is keep the town council focused on the priorities and have, so really you want to weed out topics that are kind of random and taking up time when we want to get stuff done in accordance with the priorities. And also to make sure enough of the council is interested in a topic that's not otherwise coming up. Are those the goals? Or, I mean, I know you did this in reaction to our questions on how it works, but to me, sometimes you don't need a rule, you just figure it out in the moment. So if we have a rule, it seems to me, what are the goals and does this achieve it is the natural question. Is that accurate? Would you disagree with that, either of those, or have a different purpose for it?
No, I think I would agree with that. I mean, I think, we have all different goals. Mine would be probably clarity and wanting to answer your questions in terms of how to get things on the agenda. But the goal of being efficient and making sure there's a sufficient support for amongst the council for, staff resources and time to put things
Yeah.
on the agenda is also
Okay.
important.
Okay, those are my questions.
All right, we will go, I don't have any questions, so we'll go to public comment. And I don't see any hands raised in the schoolhouse. There is one hand raised on Zoom. Rita Gomez.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. You know, it seems that we're hiring more people into the office now, and so perhaps we'll get responses to our questions, but there are times that there are no responses to the questions, and we have to then make a statement in oral comments during the town council meeting. But of course, then we're not getting an answer there. Is there going to be another path for the residents to get answers, or perhaps have a burning question in the town, no pun intended, on the agenda for discussion? Or do we just go through one or two particular council people to have them then submit a request, and perhaps the resident might write something up and give it to that particular council member to move it forward a little faster? The residents would really like to know this, because there have been some issues over the years, and I hope with all of these hiring, you know, we can get better responses to, or it's easier to find answers to questions we might have. But if there's a path for the residents that have certain questions to then have those particular issues that are really strong in the town on the agenda, that would be really helpful. So please make a path for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. I believe the next one up is Carolyn Bertongen.
Great. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. Mary brought up, I mean, everybody brought up several good points. Council members brought up several good points. Mary said that many of her memos are not being disclosed to the public or disclosed to the meetings. So that is a problem. As we know, the town council approved more monetary authority to the town manager. And luckily, town council member Greg asked to have at least some kind of oversight, but that's quarterly right now, if I understand it right. There's so many issues, especially with the financials. And so even what Judy said, I mean, that's so important. So why don't we step back? Because the process has been backwards from the beginning. So let's step back for 6 months and see how it works. And make sure that those have the authority to advance an agenda. Make sure that town council members are copied to every agenda, regardless, whether it is financials or not, whether they have authority to vote on it or not. We want transparency. I'm asking you to apply that for a few months, and then we can get back. Because in September, again, the process is you have advanced priorities, but you don't know your budget until September. It's backwards. You need to know your budget, and then you can advance to proceed, to do business. So yeah, hopefully you take every comment into account, and I hope you will listen to the council members who want to improve transparency and practicality and move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Christy Corley.
I think my name says Christy on there. Thank you. I just wanted to give you an example of something I worked hard on and brought to council members and manager, and trying to get a presentation from Flock license plate readers. And I called 8 cities, and I put together a report, and I really would like the public to hear the pros and cons and what's available with purchasing flock cameras. Now, we have a budget issue, I understand that, but if we just get a presentation, and when the budget is ready for it, we've at least been educated. So I'm a little confused how we are to, if there's been crime on our streets and we want the hotspots to have the flock cameras, this is safety and this is one of your goals. And I'd like to see it rise to the top, at least for the presentation, and then work out the money later. So I've tried every avenue to get it to the town council because Hillsborough said their sheriff brought it to a council meeting and then it was implemented after that. So I'm trying the avenue that I learned through a sheriff in another city, but I'm unsuccessful so far. And I know Sharif's working on it and he has other priorities, and it looks like we may have made some progress. I just don't know if it's temporary or permanent. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. All right, I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to close oral communications and bring it back to council for discussion. Who would like to start?
Well, I can start, since it's sort of my issue. I think the memo itself, I appreciate, by the way, you're bringing this forward in such a formal fashion. It's a little bit more complicated than that in that it speaks, I've been thinking about Patty Dew's committee handbook. It speaks to the whole question of how we represent, the liaisons represent the work of the residents to the council. So from my point of view, if I'm a liaison or even if I'm present at a meeting, I take that input as something that if their work is going to become more effective because of something they're asking for, I want to be able to take it to a level where there can be some action. And I think that needs to be formalized. We need to not feel that it's a burden. I got the sense that we weren't supposed to have any influence on the meeting, and yet there people are always asking you, please help us with getting this, mobilizing this resource, or being allowed to do this or that. And so that's the reason I got inspired about the colleagues' memos and writing down things that people wanted, like the geologic safety. At the risk of getting too specific, the Geologic Safety Committee asked for some geologic consultant time, like 2 hours, just so they could talk to the geologist. So to decrease conflict and to improve safety. And that seemed very logical to me, and I had no way of elevating it. Now, I think, then of course, rather than having the discussion, it becomes a question of, well, is this influenced by the fact that we have to get the housing element done? We don't want any dangers brought up. But no, we're supposed to be actively, their job is in part to do safety, the geologic safety. So that's why.
Mary,
I
I'm
thought
just
about it.
wondering so thank you for raising this. I'm wondering, in terms of discussion, are there changes that you would like to see in terms of
This particular
this
document?
resolution that's put forward? I appreciate the background as to why, and I think we just want to have a discussion to see if this resolution as written resolves the issue, or if we need to modify it.
Possibly on my feet.
Does anybody want to?
Well, I thought Mary was still going. If she's done, then we can.
Looking for.
Yeah,
stuff.
that's what I thought she was looking for something. We can come back.
So I think just, while Mary's looking, I feel like Mary's brought this up multiple times, sort of informally. What I like about this process is if she does a colleague's memo and she writes it up and she writes the justification up, and that at least a minimum sense of what the financial impact of doing it is, then I think it comes to the council and we can decide whether we want to spend staff time and town resources on that proposal. So in that sense, I see where this is trying to go, and that makes sense to me. And that's what I would say, Mary, is I think you've taken sort of the beginning, but then we never seem to close on are we going to spend the staff time and money to do this? And that's what I'd like to sort of formalize. And if we use this proposal, we would do that. It would come, and part of your colleagues memo would be to say, my ask here is that we put on the next, on an agenda, maybe a time certain, to discuss this and make a decision.
Okay.
And so it's going to be a two-step process, but at least we would then have, you would get the answer. Whether you get the answer you want or not might be different, but at least you would get an answer rather than this informal discussion we have, and then we never get back to it, and then you feel like it never gets resolved, which I appreciate. Yeah.
The only comment I would make, I want to make sure I heard you clearly, and no council member would really know the fiscal impact to something. That would be step 2, because we would need staff.
Not, but the ones we've done before, I mean, you can come up with an approximate, like, I think this is a 2 hours of staff time. I mean, it may be more, it's not a guarantee, but it scopes it. I think it's important that if somebody's bringing a proposal, that it's scoped. And I'm fine for staff to come back and say, well, this council member thought it was 2 hours, but reality is it's 10 hours. When it comes back for discussion, that's fine. And, when we discuss it, we can have, Sharif can basically chime in and say, I know the colleagues memo suggested this was only, I feel like I'm getting a lot of reverb.
It's maybe if you push yours back,
Yeah, maybe. Can you guys still hear me?
that's a little better.
Okay. Anyway, if it comes as a colleagues memo, part of that is going to be a discussion, and Sharif can chime in and say, I appreciate that, they estimated 2 hours, but that doesn't feel realistic. And when we go to vote on whether we're going to actually act on it, we would take Sharif's input and the scoping of the council member who was trying to suggest how big a project they were looking for. Because I certainly found that some of our projects, I think staff goes, oh my God, you want to do this? And they think it's this big. And I was only thinking like, well, let's just do the cursory version of it. So I think some kind of, fiscal impact is still important.
Jeff?
Yeah, this is formalizing, these are the 2 ways that we have right now. And this is putting them in writing. There's a lot of questions here, but there's a lot of this, the question of the scope of something and the cost of it is something we all talk to staff informally about ideas we have and whether they're feasible or not before we ever get to this point. So this is the formal process. There's a whole informal process that we all engage in at some point or another that's happening. So I feel like this defines what we actually, this defines the 2 routes for getting something on an agenda. And I think I don't want to make it any more complicated than it needs to be. And I think this achieves what we were set out to go, which is make a clear statement to the public of how something gets on an agenda.
And the most efficient way is just to say to Sharif, I really think we should put this on the agenda. And then he would take it up with the mayor and vice mayor. And that saves a lot of pen time.
Yes.
And computer time.
Yes.
So I'm for it. And I also like the fact that this memo links it in with our priorities and that residents also see that there is a way to get this done. And hopefully we can get over some of the sense of being stuck in the mud that we've had over the last 18 months.
I have more concerns about this. First, I think it's a bad idea to have a majority required. If it's just an idea, I get the sense. It's never happened that we just have taken up something no one wants to talk about. We try not to do that anyway, but a majority, I think, starts becoming extremely political. And I don't like that. I think, if we want enough enthusiasm to merit discussion and you need a number, 2 should suffice. 3 is not, from my perspective, the right approach here. It creates multiple levels of potential blockage that I think the idea here is I need an avenue to raise a new issue. And then I would want to require the town manager to get back to the person within a certain time frame. Yes or no? Yes, I'll raise it. It would be great if he were obligated to raise it with one or the other of the mayor or the vice mayor, but it can go to die there. So if we're not going to have that much process and we want to keep it simple, then we should have some type of time frame here or an obligation to get back, in some timely manner. Those are my two concerns here, and I don't want this, and keep in mind, in an election year, last election, 3 of us turned over. This essentially, if you had a majority, would prevent any new member from raising something they cared about for an entire year until you got to the priority setting discussion. I don't think that's very fair. We're elected to represent the town, and we shouldn't have a blocking mechanism. So the majority vote to me is not wise.
Yeah, your understanding of this is different than mine. I think one person can raise whatever issue they want. They
Right?
can write a colleague's memo with as much information as they want. And we will have a discussion. The thing that the majority takes is if we're going to take action on it. So if you, after the discussion from the initial colleagues memo, if you then want to have action on it, like we want to send staff off to do 10 hours of work or 100 hours of work, that takes a majority because you're now using town resources. That's the way I understood this process.
That's not my understanding, because it depends on what that document is. So to avoid Brown Act issues, it has to be at such a high level, it's going to be hard to scope. I would imagine dog park line item, we need dog parks, residents want dog parks. Staff time, I wouldn't be able to know how to ballpark that at all. So I would think we would bring the proposal for a dog park to the table at such a high level, and then we'd say, yeah, I'm interested in that. And then the town might be able to inform, like in the course of discussion, oh, that would be a big deal, that would be a small deal. But I don't think the burden should be on me to estimate the financial and the staff time, because I don't think I could. And I don't even want to take staff time until there's enough interest.
Yeah,
So that piece of the colleagues memo
Yeah,
to me
if
wouldn't
I-
make sense.
So I
My-
mean, it seems like we're getting hung up on financial impact. I mean, my only suggestion was that you roughly scope your request, whether it's financial or something. It's a scoping. That was it. So-
To your best estimate, I
Yeah,
have
and
no
that was it.
problem with
Yeah.
that, but I think the granularity of the initial memo to talk about something, like, I want that to be a pretty low hurdle to say, hey, are we interested in a dog park? And then after that, step 2 to me would be the more formal thing. How do we raise it properly? How do we inform the discussion properly? And we get staff input at this meeting whenever the topic came up to
Yeah,
help us decide.
my understanding is that, first of all, I think, that the step 1 is saying, I want to discuss this, and we've already agreed on the priorities. And so this is just a way to say, council, this is important to me. I would like to discuss this. Can this jump into the priorities list? Do you agree that we should do that? Like, consider it. And then we would need staff for step 2 to be able to tell us what the size, scope, all of that is. And that's why it's a 2-step process, is my understanding. So really, in step 1, you're just saying, I would like this to be within, this can leapfrog something that's on the priorities, because we've already agreed to the priorities. So with limited time and resources to add a new thing, this is just a vehicle to do that. I'm comfortable, I will say, with how it's written, but I don't have
And Mayor, to your point, it's to bring this to a future council agenda
Yeah.
item. It's not to approve it that night,
right.
right? And
Right.
so that's.
It's
the
just that you'd
2-step
like to
piece.
discuss it. Yeah. And then everybody hears it and everybody's aware,
So
and
council member says, I want to have a dog park. Is there enough consensus on the council to bring that to a future consent item or future item? It's not, we want a dog park tonight and we're going to act.
right,
to direct
absolutely
staff.
not.
There's extra step there.
Yeah, and then also, I guess for me, it's not a huge deal to me, but I don't have a problem with the majority, because we are basically saying this is gonna, with limited time and resources, you're gonna be pushing something else aside potentially. And we did have to agree in our priority setting. We had actually very broad consensus on all those. So it's not a huge deal to me, but
Yeah,
mean-
I mean, on the other hand, not everything is equal, and sometimes you can put in a very easy line item for an open at night. I mean, tonight we only have 2 major items on the agenda. I know we had a very long session beforehand. But on some nights, there will be some room. So I don't know why we want to prevent flexibility here, and I think this adds an extra step. And a majority, I think, would be unfair to future councils as things turn over. I
So
wouldn't
what are you
want it-
suggesting the changes? And maybe I'm getting a little unclear at this point.
I mean, if you want to have an indication of support, I would not have a majority of the council members vote in favor, because they don't even know enough at that point. I mean, every single person that hears it can still vote against it once they flesh it out. This is a, do we want to flesh this out vote? So I think that.
Yeah,
should
but,
be
but
pretty
taken to the
minimal.
extreme, if 2 people have a bunch of things they want to put on an agenda, we could be, I mean, we could have a roll forward that's 5 pages long because 2
Only
people
if-
want it. I mean, I support the majority because if you don't have 3 votes for the concept initially, I don't think you're gonna, I mean, it's just, I mean, I think it prevents, I mean, it allows for some prioritization. I guess, I mean,
I'm not arguing that priorities that are set should always
well,
be attended to first. So be clear,
what-
that's not something to be. I mean, I do feel exactly. Mary?
We're going to have to get used to the idea that people will have ideas. And that they need to be, and that some of them will be good ideas and will make positive changes, and they should be able to get as effective as possible, as quick as possible.
I think what this is suggesting is that you can bring your idea, no matter what. One person can bring their idea forward and share it with the group. What would require in this language a majority is after the idea has been vetted as necessary in terms of cost and time and all that from staff, and we have more information, it would come back to council.
Yes.
And at that point, when we have more information, it would require a majority vote. That's my understanding of what's being proposed. So I see you shaking your head. Are you comfortable with that, Mary?
Understand that.
So that's the language that's in
That's
here.
That was my assumption, yeah.
And so you're comfortable with the language?
Yeah. Now we know.
Okay. Judith, I know you're not, so, I don't, I guess, do we need to take a vote on this? Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
I've been just responding.
All right, I didn't realize
No,
that,
that's right.
sorry.
No, 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 you're good. So I'd say 2 things. First of all, our sort of present informal policies, you usually get 2 people to do a college memo. I think that has high value because if you can't get somebody else on the council to sort of join with you, even if they're sort of your ghost, then I'm not sure how valuable it is. So I kind of liked, I mean, certainly I've always done, 2 with you or 2 with you or 2 with you. I sort of like, yeah, I mean, yeah, so it looks, yeah, it certainly looks better for sure.
But I think that doesn't really, well, go ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead.
so I'm just, so I kind of like that idea, but I'm not going to push hard on. I would like to see the memo have enough information in it so that there is a fruitful discussion when it's brought to a meeting. So it's not just, I'd like a dog park. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Like it should be, we should have a dog park. We've had, residents have been asking this for years. There's, we have some possibilities or something.
Yeah, I think that's assumed. Sorry.
Well, okay, so I heard earlier, all you have to do is put in a memo that said, I'd like to talk about dog parks, and that would be a
your
colleague's
discussion.
memo. So I'm saying that the memo should be meaty enough. And then if we do decide that it's going to go on an agenda, I would like them some kind of date certain, like not just someday it will go on an agenda, but that we have some way of saying that, because what we're saying is if I write a colleague's memo, it'll go on the next agenda for the council.
Can't be true.
Well, it could be true. I mean, it could be true in the sense that all it means is it's going to come up for discussion, whether it gets, and it's going to get a vote, whether it's going to get more formally adopted at a previous one. I mean, that's one reading. I mean, that's kind of what I read. But in any case, what I'm looking for here is some sort of sense of if you bring something up, there's some process for knowing when it's going to get dealt with. Because I believe this second part, it in some ways means that something's kind of going sideways. Like you feel like you can't go to the town manager or the mayor or the vice mayor and get this issue. You're feeling so frustrated, you're having to take the second path. So then we better have some way to make sure this thing closes and it's not just bureaucratically pushed off the end of the earth. Okay, thank you.
I think,
I mean,
Jeff,
let me explain the two. On one of the ad hoc committees for town that I participated in over many months, many years ago now, there were a lot of, it was tough to get consensus. It was tough to bring people together, and people really needed their moments. So we listened to a lot of ideas, but then we had to actually make a recommendation of what to bring forward. And we needed 20 things or so. And people wouldn't stop dropping points that had clearly been exhausted. So I did see a need to make sure that there was enough momentum behind an idea to bring it up for discussion. But the rule there was one other person. And that actually worked immensely well because two people were having to put their name on it. And it was no big deal if there wasn't the second person. We just moved on because we had to get through things quickly. Having a majority would potentially have a very politicizing impact from my point of view before you even know what subject matter is. So it goes to a little bit of the level of detail that you would have in that first memo. I don't know what that is, and I don't know how granular we can be, but for me, having that second person with enough of a forcing mechanism to drop items that were clearly just not going to get traction, the majority to me changes things. That just in case that helps you understand what I'm coming from.
I feel like you're saying, Maura, because it sounds like you're saying it takes two to put a colleague's memo.
No, it's not the memo. It's at the meeting.
Okay, well,
here.
so my problem is if two people can two of us decide, Sharif, you should go spend 100 hours of staff time
On. this
on
idea.
whatever we decide. We're two people. We want 100 hours of staff time. Like, I mean, I'm going to take
That's
this.
not my intent, though.
I know it's not, but I'm trying to figure out like the post-housing adoption thing that we did, right? We did a lot of work on that. And if just the two of us went and said, now staff, you need to go make this, come back with a full staff presentation, we would have been asking for a fair amount of staff time to flesh that out, I think.
So you have a very different view of what the first step and second step would comprise than I do.
Yeah, so how do we clarify this? Because we're bouncing back and forth on different
Yeah.
assumptions.
I
I mean, the
mean,
purpose of the colleagues memo is for any one of us to have an idea. I mean, okay, you have an idea, you suggest it to the town manager, he brings it to mayor and vice mayor, and the mayor and vice mayor aren't interested. Okay, so you're kind of on an island.
Yep.
You bring the colleagues memo to the full five of us, and the public sees the five of us discuss it. I think, again, that the next step could very well involve significant staff time, and it will involve a slot on agenda, things that are kind of limited resources. I think it's reasonable at that point to flesh the idea out and actually just see that you've got at least two other straw votes to trigger that next step, because that next step could be resource intensive. I think it's reasonable to ask for those two votes. And if you come back with a colleagues memo and it's not enough specific enough, I mean, we as a group can say, we don't have enough information. Can you write a little more yourself before we vote? I mean, if you bring it to us as a colleagues memo and you don't get two other votes, there's a reasonable chance that you will not get two other votes when it comes back. I mean, I would hesitate to sort of ask for too many things to go to staff to go for extra time and money to come back to us if we don't think they're going to have three votes when they're fleshed out.
That's a good point. The other thing one thing I'm noticing is there's a difference between a colleagues memo and a subcommittee update. And I think what's been going on a little bit is we've been calling something a colleagues memo and it's been a subcommittee update. So I think that kind of blurs the understanding. I was just looking back at the colleagues memos that I've done. I did the one to create the ADU ambassadors and I did them all by myself. I never did them with anybody else. Multiple times I tried to get the meeting to start earlier, always failed on that one. Founders Award I did do with Judith. Starting the committee handbook I did by myself. One on wildfire mitigation I did by myself. And one on transparency I did by myself. And so some of these were agreed to, some of them were not, but no, that's how it's been done.
But the post-housing adoption was initially a colleagues memo that created a subcommittee.
Right. And then you were giving the update on the subcommittee.
But the initial thing was a colleagues memo.
Right.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought you were talking
saying-
about your update last week.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
no, those are subcommittee updates for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so where are we, guys? Because we've really been beating this around for quite some time.
I can make a motion
Well,
to accept this resolution.
so it does feel, are you comfortable with moving to that, Judith, or? I mean, I want to be,
I've said my
yeah.
view.
Okay.
Fine.
I'm
have
clear on
clarity.
how it's written personally.
I got it.
I've never, I mean, are you concerned, Craig, about the depth or the background? I think when somebody does a colleagues memo, you should have the background, you should
But
have
you-
the.
No, I agree. No, no.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I appreciate what you're saying, Craig, because you're answering my frustration, so I
Oh, you're
appreciate
saying
it very
actually,
much.
sorry.
You know, I do hear you wanting to, the thing was that I literally got so discouraged, I didn't even want to participate. I didn't want to write a colleagues memo. I didn't want to do any of that stuff because nobody ever cared what I thought. So you're saying, yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you. So so that's the reason why you're saying we'll make there a limit. But I, to a certain extent, you just have to get to a point where you trust the system, you know? You just have to do it. And I think this memo lays it out there and we hope the system works.
Yeah, I think
Let's
that,
see
I
if it
think, I was trying to bring up, I don't think I understand Judith's concern. That's what, because I'm pretty okay with I mean, and we could just move ahead.
Two people. So a part two of this, she would like it to be 2 out of the 5 versus 3 out of the 5 to move something forward.
Yeah.
To actually get it on the agenda the second time.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
To get it really on the agenda.
okay, that's fine.
For
So,
discussion.
well, to actually potentially
Yeah,
take action.
yeah.
recommend a more fulsome.
Yes, and then you can get a majority for spending the money.
Well, right, but Judith is saying she only wants 2 people to be able to take that next step. But now I understand it. I just,
Yeah.
so the first thing, one person can bring a colleague's memo.
Yeah.
And are we agreed it goes on the next? I mean, because you were seeing like you were disagreeing with that piece. So I'm just trying to get some clarity.
Okay,
on
we
what
can
we're-
put, sorry, I didn't comment on that. I guess the only reason I said that is sometimes we'll have a meeting coming up and it's like
Yeah,
the
Pat-
budget, the zoning, that like, we don't want to be adding things. And so maybe we'd say within X number of meetings or something like that, but just to say, assume it's the next one, I just think
Fair enough.
it's
I can
doing
go-
all of us
But just as a reminder,
disservice.
the current language says the next available council agenda,
Oh,
which
perfect.
does build in a little bit of flexibility if the next agenda is completely jam-packed.
Okay, I can accept, I mean, and then I think at some point, somebody may just thump their shoe on the table. if
Yeah, and
it- if it
hopefully
never
everybody
shows
will
up.
work
So,
together and
Judith,
do the
did
right
you want to
thing.
make an amendment? I put out a motion.
What'd you put a motion
Well, we
for?
have a
I
second.
had
Yeah.
a motion, I had a motion to accept this.
Okay,
Mayor,
yes.
if I may, just a suggestion, what it sounds like too, we have council memos and we have reports that we put out. They'll have a template to that. So it's that language that you have to put. May I suggest, may help that you have a template of a colleague's memo? So you
Sure.
know, kind of like fill in the blank, you understand. those
We
are
have
Yeah,
sufficient
we
steps.
have a template, but
We all have.
I
a
am looking at my
It's
template right
very-
here.
It's- Yeah.
Nothing to it. It's not very helpful.
I will second Mary's motion just to move us forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Roll call vote?
Councilmember Alps.
Aye.
Councilmember Hupkey.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Haskell.
No.
Mayor Warnikoff.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. Yeah, you never know. All right, guys, it's been a long meeting. Let's keep it moving. Let's move on to subcommittee liaison reports, subcommittee and or liaison and regional reports. Does anybody have a verbal report that they would like to give tonight? No.
Just a quick update. I've spoken briefly with some members of EP Emergency Preparedness. They do plan to approve an evacuation plan that staff, probably the fire marshal will bring forward to the council, hopefully in May or June.
Great.
Quick update.
Well, just briefly for conservation, in case you hadn't noticed, they're really in a panic about the fact that we can't maintain our wetlands. They don't have the budget money. They're upset about mobilizing big volunteer efforts to do stuff that isn't being supported by the town. So they're feeling a real need for public works or for an engineer or someone to help them be able to get the work done to maintain our wetlands and our open spaces.
Sounds like a colleague's memo to me.
Perfect timing. Any other liaison updates, guys? Nope. All right, I will, actually, we got to take public comment on those, on the liaison updates. We do not have any in the schoolhouse, and we have one on Zoom. Christy.
Yeah, I was wondering if you can update us on what's happening with Hawthorns. I see one meeting in June, but I don't see anything for this month or next month. If you could give us all the dates going forward, that'd be great.
Thank you, Christy. There's no update because there hasn't been a meeting. The next meeting's in mid-June. I can't remember the date off the top of my head. But it's all on the MidPen website. Carolyn Vertonghen.
Great. I
Carolyn?
think, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I think that was progress because you need to clarify among the members what they really wanted to see accomplished. And I think there was some disconnect about how to proceed what a town council liaison memo implicated. So I hope we straighten it out tonight. And yes, there's still a process that we don't understand. So the town council approved that for any new projects moving forward, there's the conservation committee, the PPTS and trails, they all have to work together. And this was approved, but there was no process. And everybody's confused. So I hope you will straighten that out as well. So yeah, thank you for this meeting tonight. I hope we're making progress and we will be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. All right. I believe that was our last public comment. And so I will ask for a motion to
Motion to
adjourn. Second. Thanks, guys.
You don't?